Okay, this is episode 25 of OverSight, a discussion talk show based around the game Overwatch. See, I thought since we're becoming so mainstream now, Monte, I'd present it as though it was like a traditional television show where maybe that would be like cable, you know, one of those cable channels that's like C-SPAN or something, you know. I wasn't too energetic with it, but I sort of described what it was, you know. And then I'd probably say something like, and here's the cast of characters that'll be discussing the Overwatch League with you today. Starting at top right. Yeah.
I don't think you're hyping it up enough. You need to add more hyperbole. Like you just discovered that people can get paid to play video games, like that Megyn Kelly interview. I always love that. I don't understand why people go so fucking crazy. They're like, yes, you know, Jake and Raucus were on the Today Show. Like it fucking matters in any way, because literally zero of those people that watch that interview or that show are going to watch Overwatch League. It's like, what is the fucking purpose of this at all? It's just making
Here's my joke, Monte.
Crazy world.
Yeah, my joke would be that there are some people who watch that, who know about Overwatch. They don't watch. You're right. They don't watch Overwatch League. But what would happen is, I bet there was a couple of guys who were sat there maybe in the Hamptons or something, in like a really expensive place, and they were like, "Oh, I own one of those teams. Hey, look, hey, honey, you know that thing I own that we never watched? I own one of those. Not those guys. No, I have the other team. Yeah, no, not the Koreans. No, the other one. Yeah." What was the name of my team again? Right, anyway. See, I'm sure there was someone in the target audience. That was hilarious, though, because every time they do that as well. I like the way they always go 0 to 100 on those interviews. So it goes from like, wow, you can make money playing games. They always have like a confused look on their faces, though. They're still expecting the guy to go, nah, you've got it wrong, actually. I don't do that. And then when they say they can, like 1 second after this person's gone from confusion over the idea you can play games, they go straight to 100, like, wow, well, my little cousin's playing Minecraft, so maybe he could be a pro. Like, well, why have you just gone 0 to 100? Like, you went a minute ago, it was impossible. Now he's just a pro as well. What's going on? Like, you know,
I also love how they were like, you could make $50,000 minimum. It's like, yes, you could have a middle class job working 100 hours a week, being, you know, beaten publicly on these fucking games. You know, it's like, I just don't understand why they think that's such a fucking big deal, as if it's fun to be a professional player or something, instead of just incredibly hard work and just rote practice that you're going over and over and over again 12 hours a day.
I think everyone
there's not a lot of glamour in it.
I think everyone just assumes where there's like kids like that their grandkids like sitting in the basement playing on the PlayStation making $50,000. Like no one expects like we are who we are, right? Like we don't like travel and that kind of stuff. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, exactly.
And then I just think it's the worst thing that the community then celebrates this as some sort of victory, that we have this giant media coverage for 3 minutes of an interview, and then people just go crazy about it. There's no point.
Exactly.
I mean, all this shit should just be ignored, basically, is my take on it.
I mean, there's the thing. They're trying to sell, Monty, this notion that it is, as you say, like a glamorous lifestyle, like just to be a pro and make money is cool. There's a lot of, you know, stress and factors that go into play here. I mean, on your behalf, you have been criticized for simple metaphors, for things you actually never did say, for trying to arrange lunch dates, trying to have lunch. You actually were criticized for trying to have lunch. That's how far people have gone now. Then, I mean, the life of a pro is no better, Monty. I mean, sometimes you're a pretty good player, shot caller, you're just sat on the bench forever while everything burns, and then eventually you have to go to a new team. You know, your family basically gets rid of you. But you think to yourself, whatever, I'm out of there, you know, make my own life. Then, for all you know, your team lacks one key role that's so blatantly obvious to everyone else, so you have to fill in for a week or two just to make the star player not look bad, but he still eventually has to come in a few weeks later and look really bad. And so there's a lot of problems is what I'm getting to. There's a lot of factors that people don't understand, a lot of stress, a lot of strain. But the key thing is you've got to be professional to the end. That's what I've learned. I don't know why I'm saying that. I don't agree with that whatsoever.
But see, that's why our show is actually good in this scene, because we're going to get the real answers about inner team turmoil today, right,
yes.
Thorin?
Yes. I mean, obviously they thought they were coming to the show, Monte, to analyse the Overwatch League, as I said. But
we were just hanging out.
But God, listen.
So I'm going to bash Dallas on my
No. We're just going to ask a few questions.
Maybe you are. I don't know what you're going to do, Custa.
I don't know. Just inquiring minds and all that. You know. So actually, let's start with, like, what do you think, Monte? Do you think we should start with the Dallas Fuel topic first?
Well, honestly, that's what people have been begging for. And we were denied having a Dallas Fuel coach on our show last week. So we haven't had anybody who can actually say anything about the Dallas Fuel. See, what's funny, though, is that apparently if you're on the Dallas Fuel, it's absolutely okay to release a number of independent statements that are just absolutely ridiculous in isolation of each other.
Yeah.
You know, pop on your stream, say some bullshit. It is definitely not okay to come onto a show where you will be, you know, guided through a series of questions that are intended to maybe make you look better, you know, or to explain yourself rationally and thoroughly. But apparently that's not okay. So as a result, now we have to deal with former Dallas Fuel members who can actually tell us what's going on.
Take one who's not under that role anymore.
It's like when someone leaves like a political administration, you know, you're allowed to tell us now a lot of the fucked up things that were going on, what you disagreed with, you know. It's actually fine now. Whereas if you were still in the Dallas Fuel, as Monte says, you wouldn't be allowed to appear on this show. You would just be allowed to hire someone to write in skywriting, fuck everyone, like I'm pretty sure Effect's doing right now or something, you know, like, I don't know. So, look, here's the thing, though, Custa. People think this is like a minefield. Like, no one can say anything about Dallas Fuel without it being some big drama, etc. I think a lot of that is just, unfortunately, the fact that when people come to make these whatever twitlongers or talk on their stream, they're really frustrated at the time. It's usually after a big loss or after this big community backlash. I actually think that's what feeds into why it becomes such like drama magnet, everything they say. There's surely a rational way to sort of start the topic, right? Like when this team was formed, obviously you were added to the squad. There was all these big names there. People expected a lot. What would you give as like a broad stroke? What were the first kind of problems in the team?
I think the problem that like Dallas had coming into it is they assumed that because like Envy sort of swept contenders that they were going to come into Overwatch League and everything was still going to be like fine and dandy. But what happened is like every other team just got so much better. And I think the Envy guys, as much as how good they were, like, you know, I don't think they've ever been like prepared to lose as much as like what was happening. And because of how many fans they had coming in, like as soon as we started losing on Dallas, it was just like this downward slope of just people who didn't know how to lose very well and people who didn't know how to like massively improve in like a short period of time because they've just been winning for so long. And then you compound that with the fans being like, yo, what's happening? This is ridiculous. It just, I think it destroyed everyone's morale. And it was just like this downward spiral of like all these stupid issues with like main tanks, people getting suspended, blah, 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 like coming together.
Why were you not in the mix for half of the equation here? Because in fact, there was some episodes where literally the only time you were mentioned was Monte saying, "Where is Custa? Where is Custa?" And then it was like a rhetorical question into the void as we all just went, "Oh yeah, he is on that team. Don't know where he is, Monte." Right? Anyway, back to the topic. Why weren't you ever involved? What was going on?
Well, like I was sort of there, but like when I first joined the roster, like, you know, you're joining the NBA roster, you're expecting them to stick with, you know, Harry and Chips. You know, they're very good support duo going into league. So I was just sort of sitting back and sort of letting things happen. But like when things started falling apart, I came in a little bit. But, you know, it was as a player, I also didn't want to overstep my bounds. Like I'm a player coming into this new roster that has a lot of things. So at first I was just sort of like feeling my way out. But eventually, after a while, like as you can tell towards the end of the videos of like stage 2, I was sort of becoming a lot more prominent and trying to sort of like help push this team towards the direction that they needed to go. But yeah, apparently at the end of the day, it wasn't enough. And here we are, Valiant.
Was it one of those scenarios where like when the team would scrim, things were looked decent enough and things were fine and it just went badly in the stage matches? Was it really like problems from the very beginning and they just never really got like a read on how to play the game or something? What do you think?
I think like when I first got into the team, it was definitely easy to recognize like, okay, there's definitely some issues here that could be exploited in the future. But you know, lots of little things that probably could have been fixed, but they just never really got fixed. And it was definitely a thing of like we were doing better in scrims and then we get in a match and it's just like we had all these plans and then as soon as we started the match they went out the window. And some people were having stage anxiety, some people just weren't performing on stage compared to what they were doing in other situations. So I don't know, I think the biggest thing about Dallas is there's no one issue that is just the core issue that solves all the things. I think there's just there are definitely more important things that were bigger mistakes, but I think there's just so many little things that you can't identify the one issue within the team.
Okay.
Do you think that with this roster now that perhaps, hopefully, there is, a stabilization at the main tank role? Because I imagine it was very frustrating trying to play on this team when you would practice with your main tank and then there would be a suspension and then you'd have to bring somebody else in as an emergency, which then I think probably destroys morale within the team because you're like, fuck, now we're just screwed. And then everybody is not playing up to their usual standard. Do you think that now that ostensibly the main tank problem is going to be solved, OG is going to be able to play in this next week, do you think that they have the tools to sort of like crawl back up now if there's more motivation within the team and everything sort of stabilizes? Because I think that's been, from the outside perspective, it seemed like one of the main problems that you guys were having was that you were never playing with all of the players available at one time. Either somebody was sick or somebody was suspended. Somebody was unable to play for XYZ reason. Effect is back in Korea. Like you guys never had the opportunity to play with or have all of your players available for a match, right? That must not have been good for team morale.
Well, that's it. Like I remember someone listing a stat, I think it was on Reddit or somewhere, that we played 22 or 23 different like player lineups in the course of like stage 1 and 2. Which is just like when you're coming up against teams like, Mayhem and Shock that maybe didn't have the best rosters, but those 6 guys played together for the entire first 2 stages. So they're improving as a team. Doesn't matter if they're not the best players or they don't have the best talent, blah, 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 blah. They were building synergy. And that was something as Dallas, I think we have the talent, just not the synergy. And so hopefully with OG coming in, as a main tank, I think he's a really smart player. He's a really positive guy. He really wants to help and work with the team. I'm hoping he can really gel that team together because, they really need someone who's going to sort of take charge and be like, okay, here's what we need to do, guys. Let's focus on this. You rally behind me and we'll go from here. So OG, from everything that I talked to him about, he seemed up to the task. So, which is exciting for that roster. Honestly, I'm really excited to see how they do moving forward. I think there's definitely Unco coming in is definitely very, very helpful for that team as well. Unco's a very smart Zen player, has a lot of skill. He can definitely help that backline sort of function. So you have Unco coming in, helping the backline. You have OG coming in, help the front line. Maybe some more understanding of how those roles need to be played compared to who was previously playing on them will really, sort of give the team a new light and perspective on how to win this game.
Okay. Clockwork, what did you think of the problems Fuelers had? Like from an outsider, when you look at their lineup and you see some of the very good names from early in Overwatch, and then even some of the additions they've had have been very good players. What's your take on kind of where they've been at as a team? What would you have thought as just someone who's an outsider?
I always just thought their team wasn't, they weren't as well put together as an actual team that they needed to be. Like they couldn't really rely on each other for like emotional support or whatever. That's why I think a lot of people, made tweets that seemed very independent of each other because like there's no one to really talk to like simmer the flame,
That is interesting because in all of their Twitlongers and their streams, it does always feel like that's part of also why there's so much drama. Everyone who's giving their perspective, it always sounds like it's them against the world. Like, oh, and then my teammate did this, and then the coach said this. It's like they never think like they never sound like actually sort of compassionate towards each other.
Which is really weird if you know the team because their manager, Tasmo, has been there for a really long time and is a very personable human being who really cares about the players. And so I don't know why the players feel like they can't talk to him. He's extremely approachable. And even on the Korean side, they have Violet, who is a former pro gamer himself, and you would think would understand a lot of those issues. He spent the last year working in League of Legends, is bilingual in Korean and English. So I don't know why Effect feels like he can't go talk to Violet or, deal with these issues a little more privately, because they have a good support staff, in my opinion, in order to deal with these problems. So it's really strange. And I think that Dallas, hopefully, I haven't seen OGE play. I've just heard, that he was from this show, that he was trying out for these contenders teams and owl teams, and that he is a shot caller and that his English is good. I think that in this team in the offseason probably doesn't need to make that many changes. I think like what Custa's saying, they just need an opportunity to gel with a real lineup because they've never had that before. And maybe it continues to be a disaster for the time being, but if you stick with most of these players during the offseason, they have a chance to take a break crucially, I think that's what they need right now, is take a break from each other and then get back together next season and start to develop that chemistry early on, then I think they could be good again. Because I don't think it's an individual skill problem on that roster.
I think something else that like really is happening as well is like you've had a lot of the players sort of be forced into switching roles like through multiple things. Like Taimu really feels like he can't play hitscan anymore. He sort of like got in his own head about that. So he's like aim isn't what it used to be. You have Chips who played Mercy for like 7 months, and then I think he lost like a lot of his confidence on Zenyatta, which I think is like the crux of a lot of his issues. Chips is a very skilled player, just can't seem to put it together at the moment. And then you have Coco who's sort of like fallen out of the team. And it's sort of been like, you have these like 3 players that were like generally pretty core to the roster, and especially people that you were hoping to rely on going into the season, just all of a sudden almost disappear. So,
I mean, I think like this team just needs a sports psychologist right now. They need somebody to work with and provide that kind of service to the team, because I think that's their single biggest issue. Is if like what you're saying is around the individual performances suffering because they are in their own heads or out of practice, not training enough, and then the interpersonal stuff that they're dealing with right now. Somebody's got to bring this team together, and they need, I think, somebody new and fresh to lead that charge within the team, apparently, because their current staff is not capable, apparently, of bringing them together. So.
I find funny. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
I just want to add. I will say that Dallas did have a person. I'm not exactly sure what his proper title was, but he did have a person come and talk to us for a group session, and they did say they'll provide individual sessions for us. I think it was once a month if anyone wanted to follow it up. I think no one did follow it up. I was considering it, but yeah, no one followed it up. So Dallas did provide it, but the players didn't.
It's mandatory counseling.
Yeah, so maybe that's something that they need to force or provide. But yeah, that's what they did.
One thing I find funny though is whenever all these twitlongers and people venting on their stream or like vague subtweets come out, people always play this game, Monte, which I call like competitive Clue or something. They always try to figure out, right, who is it? Who's the one to blame? It's like, if you've watched the Dallas Fuel for the last 2 stages, here's a crazy concept for you. It's all of them. Just take all that they're all saying, add it all together. Yeah, okay, there's going to be certain times when there'll be a slight disagreement. Oh, I said this. No, actually, it was me who told you that first. Right, okay. But if you take, what's great is they're actually all inadvertently telling you what's wrong. They're all like, oh, my teammate fucked up this way, right? Note that down. Then when his teammate says how he fucked up, note that down as well. And then eventually you've got it all, haven't you? You've got the whole framework in front of you, and it's all just a burning dumpster fire, and then
it's a garbage mosaic, really.
Yeah. I was going with the whole fuel theme, I was trying to give them something there with that marketing,
Everyone just throwing their own trash into the fuel dumpster fire.
Right, Clockwork. Speaking of teams that have had some sort of issues internally, they've had to mix around players, role swapping, that dreaded term. What has been your situation in Outlaws? Because obviously people must remember you when you were inserted to try and play Tracer for a little while, and obviously there's this period where one of your players was missing. So what's kind of your cycle been with Outlaws, which has obviously at times been a very good team?
I think like the biggest thing with me and the team is that we work best when we never sub people in. I think that's the thing for most teams really, is that when you have the same people on stage, you just build up a momentum. And it's like, if you're winning, you really don't want to like substitute a player in from that, group of people who's already winning. And our best results come from Jake and Linkser. So it's kind of hard for me to like get in and like play something that, people want me to play, because I think on average they perform better with Linkser and Jake. But, maybe there are some maps where like it would be better to have me in, but is it worth the momentum change? Is it worth throwing me in when I only really practice that map, like however many times a week during practice?
Coming into the team, was it set up like this? Like these will be the starters, and then you can compete for a spot, or you'll be a sub?
No.
How was it described to you?
I mean, I think like originally when I was joining the team, like my proper title was as a substitute, but I think when we finally like sat down and started playing, no one really looked at it that way, because like before the season started, we mixed and matched and did whatever, and it just so that we got the best results out of what the lineup is now that we're running. So we don't really like look at like, obviously there are people who are subs, but like the subs are very involved in the team and stuff. It's not like I'm like behind Linkser's back, like looking at every single time he misses a pulse bomb, and I'm like, hey coach, like we're very like tightly knit in that aspect. So.
But I mean, one of the issues, we've talked about this on the show before, is that it's harder when you talk about having, a solid 6 players that are constantly practicing together and building up that synergy. But one of the issues is that if you are a bench player like you are right now, then you never get a chance to practice with the team, which then degrades your own skills at working with the team because you don't have 12 players. And I think when we think about Philadelphia, both of their teams, like they have 12 players and they just split them into 2 groups and they're constantly practicing against each other. The Philadelphia B team, I know, is playing contenders teams and even other Owl teams as well. So it gives them a chance to continue improving. And that's something that Numlocked has publicly complained about on the Valiant. But now the Valiant are signing a bunch of more players and are going up to a 12-man roster, right, Custa?
Yeah.
So there's going to be this, there's going to be a time for these people to compete. So my question is, do you feel like your skills are atrophying because you don't have a place to play outside of solo queue at this point in time, now that you've been removed from the starting roster?
I think that, I definitely think that's a thing. I think that we're, maybe in the future looking to get 12 players, but I wouldn't really use the term atrophy. I just think that everybody else is getting better, so you're like stagnating, really, because you don't really, everyone who scrims, like an Owl scrim is so important, I think, compared to like when we played in contenders and earlier, we would go like 6 hours of scrimming and I feel like I never got better as a player. It was just like a grind that didn't feel worthwhile at all. But I feel like with the amount of effort that's put into Owl scrims and the level of the opponents you're playing against, you genuinely can improve like through a day's worth of scrimming. Like it feels like so dramatic. So if you don't really have that, it is definitely hard to like jump in and show that you've improved and stuff. I remember, I think I came in like the second stage or something, and like I did it like pretty okay, and we won. And like everyone on Reddit was like, "Oh my God, this guy must have improved so much," but not really. Like, because I didn't play like significantly more than I did before. It was just a different environment, and I just hit my stride that game because you don't really have like the time to grind with the team. And playing solo queue is helpful, but it's not really like supplemental. So
I think that's one of the biggest issues with like sub players as well. Is like, it's not like you have a good amount of time to integrate a player coming in. So let's say you're like, oh, we're going to play you this week. Okay, you have 2 days to perform as well as the person who's been scrimming for the last 5 weeks. Exactly. So it's like, you really, and unless you've been like very attentive in scrims, which, I know a lot of players do, where you understand all the strats that your team is running and everything, it's still hard to get the feel and understand exactly what you should be doing in those matches.
When you said that, though, I like the way you saved it. You were like, which a lot of players are very attentive in scrims. if you're not the player who's going to be playing the game, to me, I feel like that's like that scenario where it's like, is this going to be on the quiz? And if the teacher says no, you're like, right, delete everything there. Just say it now.
Back that one up.
Okay.
So why don't you think, if this is a problem for you and the Houston Outlaws, why haven't you guys moved up to filling out your 12-player roster? What's the reasoning behind that? Because it's too late now, obviously. Yeah. You could still sign players on contracts. They just wouldn't, and you could scrim them with them, but they wouldn't be able to play in Overwatch League. So I guess you can have more players. They just technically wouldn't be eligible because now the trade and signing deadline has passed. So what's the reasoning behind that? If like at least in the Outlaws case, if you have an answer.
I think we're really just like trying to be careful with it, honestly. Like we don't want to like throw away our slots and stuff on things we're not confident on. So I don't know. I think that's really the mentality.
Your slots are useless now. You can't add anybody anymore. So
yeah. Well, I mean, just at the start of every stage, though, just as like a heads up, like we don't want to sign someone that we absolutely don't like. If we absolutely need the person, we'll look to sign them. But the mentality has been that we don't. So we don't want to, just throw away a slot and sign someone just for the sake of signing them. But I think that it would be good down the line, just because, again, when you're a sub player, you don't really have a lot of time. And then like, even if you play one map out of the 4 maps you play, you have to realize that the scrims are also mirroring your stage time, right? So like, you don't get many scrims either. You get like a map or 2, and then like maybe a map the next block. But it's all very convoluted.
Monte, I'm confused by your questioning, my friend. Are you not aware that the Houston Outlaws has Mendo, Spree, they've got Fact Fiction, they've got Clockwork? It's like, I haven't even started, I haven't got to the starters yet, mate. These people don't play the games. What are you talking about? How's he going to sign more players? They've already filled out the roster with their friends, haven't they? They've literally signed a peanut gallery to fucking watch them play the game or something. Like,
so we have to ask, because we might as well put out missing person reports for 2 players.
There should be a fucking Overwatch League
one of them,
milk carton with Mendo exactly. on the back. Like, where is he? Where is this guy?
And Coco as well. So we have to ask. So we'll start with Mendo. Clockwork.
Mendo,
Where is Mendo?
I think he's explained it on stream, hasn't he? I think, he had a lot of tooth issues, which was like a serious thing for a long time. He had a wisdom tooth that was like getting infected repeatedly, and he was like working out his insurance stuff that wasn't working. I'm not sure what his status is on that. I think he said that just like to us that he wasn't quite ready to take like a step into being like a full-time OWL player. I don't know.
Why the fuck would you sign an OWL contract then?
He just had like a lot of like health issues and stuff, and it probably like degraded his confidence, and he wasn't quite there mentally. So that's like the extent to which I know. You can give him a call real quick.
Here's the thing, Monte.
He
obviously wrecked you. When he did his negotiations, he just made sure he got the health insurance as part of it. Like, I must have health insurance. That's weird. Okay, I guess we could figure that out. Right, now I'm on the team. I'm not going to leave. I'm not going to leave, by the way. I've got a contract here. I've got a lot of things to be working on. So let's start at the top.
Okay, more questions. When was the last time Mendo set foot in the OWL practice facility?
It was pretty recently. It wasn't like a tremendous amount of time. I don't remember the last time. I mean, like probably like a week.
I have literally never seen him at the studio.
Yeah, he takes his time with the studio business.
What the fuck? What does that mean?
This takes his
this
time.
guy is like, he was signed to this roster. There's nobody who is paying this guy right now, paying him money to be ostensibly a professional Overwatch League player, that is forcing him to come to team practice at the studio. What the fuck is going on?
I don't know. he had a lot of issues.
Flame in all of this.
He had a lot of issues, so it's just very complicated. I don't know. I'm sure if like nothing happened to him health-wise and stuff, that he would have been much more active, and he would show up to like the practice facility all the time. But the way
so what do the Outlaw players who don't get into the lineup do then? You just sit back and wait for that call? Are you like the fucking alternate for like if the president goes down, like yeah, you've been drafted in, like that fucking TV show they made, whatever it was called, the replacement or something?
No, we show up every day. I mean, like, because there are times when we think that maybe we should start running this person on this map, and maybe we can try this person on this map. And if we don't, we all just kind of like sit and we watch and we analyze the same way a coach would, and we like give people hints and tips and things that we can improve as a team. Like, I think every single sub, shows up like every single day to just watch and analyze, and
except for Mendo.
Except for Mendo. for reasons,
Do you know when is there like some delay for visa or something with Arhan? When does he come?
For Arhan, I think there's like a slight delay. Like, we could get him a tourist visa and it could speed it up, but we don't like for now with the visa we're trying to get. I think it would be like end of April or so.
Okay. Right.
It does take about 4 weeks to get the P1 visa, so that makes sense.
Okay, understandable. And then yes, Custa, where is Coco?
As the other part of our missing persons report.
I don't know how much like I want to say, because like obviously he's not part of my team anymore, and like it's on the Dallas to sort of like make it clear. But I don't know. But Coco, he wasn't really present at all during stage 2. There are good reasons. I think the team is working with Coco to find what is best for his future. I have no idea what they're planning on doing, what is happening, but I wouldn't. At this point, all I will say is I wouldn't expect Coco to return. So moving forward, all the moves that Dallas have done make sense for that. When you're putting Mickey on Winston and Seagull on Diva instead of playing Coco on Winston, I feel like that is made pretty clear. So, I really like Coco, and I really hope he has a good future. But I don't think you'll see him again. But at least on Dallas.
Let's actually just talk about the Overwatch League games then.
No,
bring it up.
I have
Energy
another
levels are so low right now. Come on then, Monte.
I have another question. So, Arhan, when we add Arhan, why did you guys pick him up? Because it seems from the outside like a rather strange choice.
And doesn't Arhan joining mean we're basically never seeing Clockwork? Like, if they had another person there, come on.
I think that Tyrone really wanted him. He's another Korean, and he does a lot of good coaching work and analysis work with Tyrone. For our last few matches, he's been talking to Arhan over Discord and stuff. We go to someone's apartment and we do team meetings and stuff, and he'll be on Discord with Arhan and they'll be talking, and then we'll be talking, and we come up with an idea and a plan. But he's also a good Genji, and we needed a Genji. Linkser, the thing with the way I look at it is that Linkser is a really, really good tracer. He's not necessarily someone you'd want to run on tracer full time because you miss his Widow and his McCree and whatever, but I think that he's an incredibly good tracer. And if we're ever planning on running dive, it would probably come down to Arhan and Linkser, with Linkser on tracer, Arhan on Genji. And Arhan has a lot of good ideas and a lot of experience playing that comp, so there's another reason.
See, my problem with Arhan is that Arhan was always a player that had rosters built around him, and when things would not go his way, he appeared from the outside to be highly prone to tilting and sort of 1v11ing and just sort of jumping into the enemy team when he was frustrated and expecting his teammates to follow up with him. And as a player, he was always the focal point of Africa. Even when I thought that Recry was the better DPS player, it was always all about Arhan, which seems like a very odd choice to introduce to an established roster with established synergies and a method of playing the game.
Yeah, I think really what went down with it is we knew Arhan was a good player, and Tyrone was really confident about picking him up just because they have a good rapport going regardless. So he can easily control him, and if things get out of hand, Tyrone can step in and we can do what we need to do. But I think we really just needed a Genji for sure, because we don't have anyone who's at least played Genji at a really high level, and I think that's even more important than Tracer, honestly. There are a lot of players who kind of flex off the Tracer and it's whatever. I think it's way harder to flex off the Genji when you haven't played Genji for a long time. It's a starting Genji on a team. You really just get caught out all the time, and you don't have as much impact. So.
Even in this map pool where we've seen generally a decrease in Genji play because Sombra Tracer is so strong and we have so many Widowmaker and Junkrat maps in the pool?
Well, the whole Sombra thing was kind of a surprise because, we were trying to run dive, and dive was super good last stage. And dive will always be good, so it's always good to have a Genji who can jump into dive, because at any time, it can change back to dive being the best. I'm sure at the end of the stage, people will be like, oh, Sombra actually isn't that good, and let's just dive. And they'll be like, oh, okay, we need dive again. So
sounds like every stage.
So if we look at where the Outlaws are as a team, the stage began brilliantly. They beat the London Spitfire. You're thinking, wow, do they even need Arhan? Go straight into getting 4-0'd by Boston. When does he get here again? When's that visa approved? What's the status of the team at the moment? Coming into the split stage, rather, did everything look like it was in place to be a top team again?
Yeah. So during stage 2, we skipped a lot of steps, on our end that made us not perform as well. I think first stage we were really punctual on all of our meetings and stuff. We really wanted to meet every single day and just put together as much strategy with the rest of the team as possible. We would meet at someone's apartment, or we would stay extra hours at the facility or whatever. And we kind of skipped out doing that on stage 2, probably because we were so confident and lackadaisical because of how good we did in the first stage. We were yeah, whatever, But it really showed to be be detrimental to the rest of our game. So during this stage, we were like, okay, we have to turn it all around. You know, we ended 5-5 last stage, so let's start doing what we did on stage 1, and we'll bring it all back. Unfortunately, we had some other obligations, like during the break, like we went to Texas and we met with people. So we had like less time than we wanted to practice the new map pool and stuff. Like Blizzard World was like kind of a maze to all of us. We really, you know, we played it in matchmaking, and that's pretty much it. Like I remember playing it in one scrim and I was like just blinking into rocks and stuff, and I was like, so it was like, you know, we definitely wanted a lot more time on those maps and we couldn't quite get it. So, you know, we felt pretty good against London. We always kind of do. I think they're a team that we play well against generally all the time. But Boston's like a super prepared team. They're always ready. They were probably like watching all of our games and analyzing all the maps very, very hard while we were doing other things. So we really have no one to blame but ourselves.
Most of I think a lot of the teams you were off, like you were either doing obligations in their home cities or home territories, or London was just back, like almost all of them went back to Korea on the break. And I think it's really hard halfway through the season. I hope next year for Overwatch League that there are actually 2 or 3 weeks halfway through after stage 2. So like a week break between stage 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, but 2 or 3 weeks between stages 2 and 3, because that way you have a chance to take a break and do all of this other stuff and practice for the next stage, because I think we're seeing a lot of teams, not just you guys, suffer as a result of having these various obligations, except for New York apparently, that are just immune to the fact that they went to New York City the entire time and still managed to absolutely just slap London yesterday. So,
yeah, the week break isn't really like a week. It's like 2 or 3 days, right? Because like you end on like a Saturday, and then like you take a couple days, few days break, and then you want to start practicing again by the end of the week. So.
Right, we have seen in some of the losses that we've seen from like London, for example. I think I'm trying to think who else did it. I think maybe Seoul did it one game. Some of the losses where the Koreans have had to like the Western teams have been where they like messed around with their roster, etc. But this was the real London Spitfire team in this Houston Outlaws game. You know, there was no excuses to be had here. Why do you think the match went this way?
I think a lot of at least Seoul and London, like they're really not good at playing against Junkrat, which is like a huge thing for our team because we have such a good Junkrat player. It's like they cannot understand how to play around it, and will just continuously get picks. I think New York is the only team of like primarily Koreans that have been able to handle the Junkrat. But I think a lot of the other ones, they just don't give it any respect, or maybe they try to play too fast or too recklessly, and they just get picked over and over again. And I'm sure like by the 3rd map, once you've gotten picked by Junkrat like 20 times, it becomes like really mentally draining to play. Okay. And I think dive in general, like again, like all they really play is dive. So if you continuously get picked, it's like never going to work out.
What do you think, Monte?
I mean, I think that's an accurate assessment. I also think that it's hard to play against you guys, because the issue with playing against Houston is that if the dive isn't working, if you're getting picked off by Widowmaker or Junkrat, which they primarily use, and then you try and counter them with Widow to get picks on your own, well, it just so happens that Linkser is probably the best counter sniper in Overwatch. So you sort of run out of strategic options if your dive is not working. I also think that right now London is somewhat limited in what they can play, because basically, unless Hureg's going to come into the game, that they're not going to play Pharah. And we did see a little bit of Prophet's Pharah earlier this week, but they don't really have access to that tool. And I actually think that London's at their best when they are playing Junkrat as well, but for some reason they don't do it very frequently.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
It's been weird to see like how they're running their strategies, and for some reason, whenever London starts a series, they will run that strategy for the rest of the series, whether it's working or not. They won't change their strategy halfway through a series. So I don't really get why they do that, because we've seen them. So for example, you guys the Outlaws have a winning record. You're 3-0 in the regular season against London. And when you beat them, they run dive, and they'll just like run dive for an entire series. But then for example, when they actually beat you, when they were playing in the stage playoffs, they flipped it up and were playing a lot of Junkrat in that one series. But for some reason, they don't go back to that. They just continue to come in with a game plan, and they don't change that game plan in the game. So I think that they have issues shot calling in a map and trying to adapt if their initial strategy that they came in with isn't working.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's very strange because I think Birdring is like a really good McCree player. He can probably play Soldier really well. And Prophet, like, he can play Junkrat. But it's just weird. Like, they can play these heroes and they just seem to refuse to do it. Probably like a lack of preparation on their side. Like, maybe they don't play those comps a lot in scrims and they're kind of afraid to switch to it on the fly in the map.
That's what I think a lot of Korean teams have the issue with. Obviously, New York don't have the issue because they just kill everyone with the same thing that they play every time. But like London and Seoul, I think have both, like, a lot of their losses that they've had come from a team has found out how to beat them with like what they're playing, and they refuse to switch off the comp that they've seemingly practiced for that week to beat that team, and they don't adjust. Like you saw the same thing with Seoul against us. They just kept running the same thing. They didn't want to switch out the comp that they were playing or the players that they were playing, and they just went on to lose. So it's sort of weird how they don't have that adjustment.
I noticed that's like how the way they practice too. They will run dive. They will get full held on a map trying to run dive just because they want it to work. They want whatever they're executing to actually be executed. So they can send like their Winston behind, they can send their Genji behind. They'll get picked over and over and over again for 4 minutes. But like maybe the last push it'll finally work. But they'll try it until like it just works. And for every other
isn't
team,
that what practice is for though?
Yeah,
like,
I agree completely. But they only play that comp. So it's like they practice dive and they'll keep running dive and they'll just until they lose or until they get full held, and then they come into a match and they have like no other alternatives.
Yeah, they don't know how to adjust. Instead of like in scrims doing something for 2 or 3 minutes, being like, this doesn't work, and then you find your adaptation that helps you to win. If you can do that in the match, that's how you're going to win games, instead of like forcing dive into a Junkrat Widow like all the time on Anubis.
Yeah,
that kind of thing.
Because obviously, as I mentioned the context before, some of the past losses we've seen from some of the big Korean teams, some of them were where they were fucking around with the lineup and they put like a weak experimental lineup in for 1 or 2 games and then switched off, but not in enough time. But this was like a legit, just outright, they got beaten. Like if you watch this game, Birdring's in all the games. He just doesn't blow everyone's head off. It was quite startling, actually. Does this mean, Monte, that actually Western team could win Overwatch League? I mean, I know no one's yet beaten New York, which is what you need to do in the playoffs, but does it mean a Western team could win Overwatch League?
Well, sure. I think that Philadelphia is looking a lot better. I think what impresses me the most about Philadelphia is how fast they've improved, because they really did, and we talked about this in the last episode, show massive improvement over the course of stage 2, where they completely changed a lot of the way they were engaging and their habits as to how they were appealing for their supports and the way they were playing around their tanks. And that was really, really impressive. I also think that the way that Valiant is going right now, looks like they've improved basically instantly, and we'll, I think, get over to them in a second. So I think there are teams that are still in the playoff race that could be challengers for a potential title if anyone can deal with what New York is doing, because they've been so incredibly consistent. Now, that said, I think Birdring, in my eyes, looks like he's been tilting the last couple of weeks. He definitely tilted off the face of the earth against Philadelphia in the stage playoffs because he was playing like an idiot. He basically looked like he was getting angry at Carpe in these Widow duels and was taking increasingly risky shots or like peeks against him to just try and shut him down, but got punished for it basically every time. And so Birdring, I think they need to stabilize him because he seems to be emotionally affected by a lot of these games and getting frustrated and taking risks that he shouldn't as a result, which then snowballs against London because he's dying more than he normally does. But I think that London, when they actually figure out how to field their good starting roster consistently, because even later, against New York yesterday, they were switching in Hagapun and Closer and Woo Hyal and Hureg, and they basically ran through their entire roster yesterday and couldn't find a solution to New York. But I think that they just need to go back to what's go back to the basics. Just run this 6-player roster for a while, make sure that one works, and then try and reintegrate those players, because the constant swapping has not been effective.
Okay. So do you want to talk about the Valiant now, Monte?
I do. I do want to talk about the Valiant. So there are a lot of asterisks on your performance coming in this week with the Valiant, such as Seoul playing horribly with a lot of their B teamers, and you guys playing the Shanghai Dragons. So what I kept saying on the broadcast was Valiant are playing well, but it's really hard for me to gauge how good they are because the other teams are just playing so badly. You guys did look tight. You look dominant. Let's start with, though, how has it been joining the Valiant for you? Because it seems like you guys have clicked really fast when it comes to teamwork and synergy.
Well, like, the good thing about just joining Valiant is, so we had 2 switches. We had Space coming into the main roster for Envy, and then you had me coming in on the Mercy Lucio roles. So, but the core of what Valiant were doing was exactly the same. Like, I just came in, they said, this is what we're going to play. This is what you should do. Done. Space already knew what he was supposed to do because he's been paying attention, and he's a smart guy. So I just sort of came in as a Mercy. It's just like, okay, just help us do what we want to do. So it felt like it was a pretty easy click. They came in, they told me exactly what they wanted me to do for the roster, and just sort of like try and communicate, try and track ults, try and help, team strategy as much as possible. Fade is a really good communicator as a main tank, really deals with the front line. Kriv really helps the back line, and then, it's just everything in between. So it's been clicking really well. We've been playing really well. I can say that, in scrims, we're doing really well as well. So not only against, as you said, Seoul and Shanghai, I think the best thing out of those 2 matches that both of them were incredibly clean, which is important. Being able to, like, we almost didn't drop a point against Shanghai, which is actually something that's really hard to do because it means that the team is playing consistently well throughout the entire series, which can sometimes be hard. So, it's really promising. With that said, we're probably still in that honeymoon phase period of, me and Space coming into the roster. Everything's still going well. Everything's clicking. So it'll be really interesting to see where the team goes over the next, couple of weeks to see if we everything keeps going well and we keep the momentum. Fortunately, we've had a pretty easy run off the first 2 weeks are pretty easy. I think we're playing Shock and Fuel this week. So Shock is, for me, I would say a must win for us, like, to sort of prove things and, get into the stage of playoffs. So, and then Dallas is one of those ones which is just, it's going to be really about playing clean and just sort of like playing our game. So we'll see.
So with these roster changes, despite all of these other players being added to the roster, you guys have just stuck with these 6 players so far for the first week of play. All 6 of you on the Valiant played every map. And so is that part of the strategy to sort of set things down right now and then slowly introduce new players over time? Or what's the coaching staff doing?
Yeah, we have a lot of talent within the bench. So, we got Bunny on Tracer. I think it was all about not moving too many parts at once, right? Because imagine if we tried to pull in Bunny instead of Soon for those series, all of a sudden Bunny's trying to work out what he's trying to do. We don't understand what Bunny's doing from the rest of the roster. So I think the coaching plan is to integrate all the players and find a place for them within the team. But the ideology that I've talked to a lot of the coaches about is they want a 12-man roster and they want anyone to always be able to play if their performance is good and the person playing the other role is bad. So every person has the ability to get on the main roster if they deserve it. So that's what we're trying to get to. Obviously, it's not going to happen overnight. So there's going to be a lot of work needing to be done, but it's all going pretty positively so far. And I think we've got 11 players on the roster at the moment. So hopefully we'll be rounding that out soon.
So I talked to Noah a lot over the past week or so, and he has been he's praised to me Coach Moon extensively, saying how great of a coach this guy is and how he has a holistic approach not only to in-game coaching but to out-of-game teamwork and philosophy. What has your now limited experience been with Coach Moon and the Valiant coaching staff? Do you feel like it's been a big change for you coming out of the Dallas Fuel? Has it been helpful?
The coaching has definitely been a lot more hands-on than Dallas was. So I honestly haven't worked a lot personally with Coach Moon, because essentially I talk to Stoop and Goomba and they give me a lot of the feedback that I need to do and talk about, and they talk about the comps. And then I think they talk to Moon. So Moon controls the entire like structure of everything, but Goomba and Stoop get things done. All right, because there's a lot of Western players. Moon's English is still not that good. We have a constant translator for him, but it makes it really hard for myself and Moon and like other Western players to communicate with him. So at the moment, I've just been working with Stoop and Goomba a lot, and they've been talking with Moon. So it's actually been great. I feel like they've been giving me a lot of great tips on how to improve my play, and I think they've really been the main reason that I've integrated so well into this team, because they've given me a very clear idea of what I need to do within the team. Because if I just sort of came in and started winging it, it gets a lot harder, and all of a sudden I'm playing Dallas's game instead of Valiant's game. So it's been really great, honestly.
So it sounds like there's more structure. Has there been a big change for you when it comes to team culture as well? How's the feel within Valiant after?
Yeah, it feels. I feel like there's a lot more structure in Dallas. I feel like the team was a lot more player run. Like the coaches definitely had influence on Dallas, right? And they were pushing us in the right direction, but the players sort of controlled a lot of what we were doing in the game. While in Valiant, it feels like it's the opposite. The players have their ideas, but the coaches sort of push their ideas, push what we want to run for the week. And then the players can obviously be like, no, I don't think this is going to work for this reason. And the coaches work and adjust. So it's sort of two different sides of the coin. And I feel like the Valiant style is a lot better for the longevity, because if you give players too much control, I think the biggest problem with having players with control is players are biased towards their own play in every sense of the word. So it allows you to just focus on your own play and what you need to do better without having influence over the team. So I think it's going to be really positive moving forward. And everything that I've heard from the coaches and all that kind of stuff say that Moon is controlling everything and he's doing an amazing job. So I'm more than happy to trust him, and seems to be working. He's picked up a lot of great players that really seem to be helping the team.
So what was the process of you moving to the Valiant? Was it did you request being traded from the Fuel? Did you know it was coming? Did you have any say over this decision?
So I got after the stage 2, after our last match, I was just like, I was at home at like late at night, because everyone was leaving for the stage, right? So I think Kai was heading overseas. Everyone was leaving. So Kai actually had to call me, and he just said, we've been in talks. We wanted Unko, and the only person Valiant was you. And that's the only reason they trade. So we want to trade you for Unko. So I was like, it came out of left field. I had no idea what was going on. I was honestly, when I first got told it, I was pretty upset, right? I put a lot of time, I put a lot of work into, playing with this team. And then they're like, yeah, we want to trade you. So that sort of hurt at first, but
you got to be traded to a team that was better. How upset could you possibly be?
He's doing his best to make it sound like it was really hard to leave the Fuel, Monte.
Well, no,
let the man talk.
Well, it's like, at first I was like, it doesn't matter how badly you're losing. Like, I've played with these guys for the last 3 months, and like they've been like, they let me in. They gave me a lot of leadership role within the team, especially towards the end. So when they're first like, yeah, we want to get rid of you, it was like, oh, okay. But fortunately, Kai, they sort of made it very clear. It's like, this was my decision. I could have easily said no to the trade if I wanted to, or I could say yes. So after I talked to Noah, I talked to Stoop, I talked to Space, and sort of talked to all those guys about what's happening within Valiant. Is this worth trade? And they gave me a lot of like positive responses, in that the team was changing for the best. So when you come for a team like Dallas, which their issues aren't, OG is not going to solve all their issues, right? Like, he's going to be a very positive force, but it's not going to fix overnight. And then you go have a team like Valiant who says, we really want you. Like my team's trying to trade me, and another team's being like, we really want you. And here's all these great changes that we're doing to make this team better. Like, it's not really a hard choice after that. It's like, okay, well, I feel like I'm wanted over here, and I feel like we can do great things. So why not?
Okay. Clockwork, what have you thought of the Valiant? Obviously, it's another team that's been through a lot of like transformation from the beginning of the Overwatch League to now. Like, if you look at the starting lineup now, like half the people there weren't playing that role or even on the team necessarily. So what do you think of Valiant as it stands now?
I always thought they were really, really good, but I think that they could only be better with the changes, honestly. I think that the team needed like a better leadership role and like in game, I guess. And I think Custa will really bring that to them. And I think that individually their players are really good. Like Soon is an amazing tracer, and Bunny now is also incredible. So they could also bring him in at any time. I think that they're incredibly good. I expect that they'll only get better. I think. It seemed toward the end that they were lacking a few things. I think they were kind of like falling apart at the seams. So I think the changes were necessary.
Okay. What is the situation? Do you know anything about this, Custa? Can you tell us anything about the scenario where, like, before you joined, they had Kareev playing as like the DPS player, and then that seemed to be some aspect of the dynamic as to why they had to make other roster moves elsewhere. And now, obviously, we can see him back playing. Well, he's on Zenyatta most of the time nowadays. You know, he's moved back. So do you know anything about what's going on in the team with that?
I think Noah summarized it pretty well in the AMA. I remember reading his, and is sort of the best way to put it is they had a lot of issues, even from the start of season 1, of like players that aren't going to be able to work together over like a long period of time. And then on top of that, just like little issues that are fine when you're winning, which is what was happening in stage 1. Like they're winning, who cares? You know, if this player doesn't like this player, or this little issue is causing this nagging thing. And then they get to stage 2 and you start losing, those issues just blow up. They go from 0 to 100 really fast. And that's sort of why you saw Valiant like fall apart. And from what Noah was saying, they tried to just change little things. Instead of trying to make this major change to like fix these issues, they just tried to change like little things like, okay, maybe they don't want to play with agilities. Let's take agilities out and we'll put Kareev on Widow, or like Kareev on hit scan because he's really good at that. And maybe this will fix the issue because now agility is in the issue and maybe people have problems with agilities. And then you go, okay, well, now we have Uncle on Zen who can play full-time Zen now, which is great. But we have Verbo on the Lucio Mercy now. Okay, things sort of working out, but then they start losing again. And they're like, oh, well, now these issues are getting worse and worse and worse. So that's why they ended up, I think, essentially cleaning house of like what they believe was a lot of the issues within the team, a lot of like the dynamics that were causing issues. And they've like really focused on building like a team that is going to work together for a long period of time. So that's what they're trying to do. It seems to be going well right now, but as I said, honeymoon period, we'll see if it works in the longevity.
Also, Noah said that it wasn't even necessarily communication or issues with working together, because in the instance of Silk Thread, he said that the reason why they wanted to trade him was that both Silk Thread and Agilities required a lot of individual coaching time in order to improve, and so they didn't have enough coaching resources to put into both of those players, so they had to choose one, and they ended up choosing Agilities and trading Silk Thread over to the Gladiators. So I think they're being intelligent about how they are allocating their resources, and they're on a player-by-player basis saying, okay, how independent is this player? How much individual help do they need from the coaches? Okay, well, we don't have enough coaches for that or enough resources to give that person that attention, so we need to get rid of them, bring in somebody who maybe is a bit more they can grow by themselves better, as opposed to needing all of this coaching time. And I think it paid off too, because a lot of the coaching resources that were going into Agilities, even when he was sitting on the bench behind Kareev, are starting to bear fruit now, because we've seen his play improve by a lot. So
yeah, Agility's been playing really, and yeah, that's like pretty much it. Like, it doesn't have to do with like players just disliking people or players being toxic. It's like all those little things where it's just like it seems like such a small thing that it's like we don't have enough coaching for Agilities and Silk there. But then if you add 10 other issues on top of that, it all starts causing to the downfall of the team.
Monte, one move that happened in this team, which I noticed, aside from like people laughing at the circumstances, there wasn't really a lot of commentary on it, was Envy getting released, who, when I watched them play, he always looked like actually one of the more improved players in their team, and they've let him go, and now they've signed KSF and Fincy, so not exactly like huge blockbuster names that everyone's aware of. Are you surprised they let Envy go?
I mean, I don't know how he was integrating into the team in terms of his personality. I think that the plan was always to put Space in, from what I understand, because once he turned 18, they really valued his shot calling and leadership abilities in the game. So I think they were always intending to bench Envy. The release of Envy, though, I think is a surprise that must have been from internal issues, because otherwise I don't understand why you don't keep him on as a bench player. So there must be something more to that story. I think he was playing well, but I think Space is a better off-tank player. He's played extraordinarily well for his debut in the last week. Perhaps Custa can give us more insight into that as to, how is working with Space? Is he very vocal in the game? Is he one of the leaders of the team?
Space, like, I remember playing on Arc 6 with Space like a year ago, and like first coming into the team, he was definitely someone that like really like stood out to me, because he's, for 17, he's like very smart, he's very level-headed, and he like takes criticism like really well, and so, which are like all like super important things for like an up-and-coming player. So I think Valiant's also done a really good job at like grooming him to be like the situation where he's in. Like he's like much more calm on stage, and he's only calling the things that he needs to call, and he's always like just having a positive like communication on the team, and he's never negative. So when you have a player like that who can also play diva like he plays diva, and the thing that impressed me about Space is he can play anything. He can play all the off tanks as well at like an exceptionally good level. It's not like he's just a diva player. He can play Roadhog really well. He can play Xayah really well. He can fill pretty much all of those roles. So I think Space is a very bright future ahead of him, at least in terms of Overwatch. So it's been a lot of fun playing with him, and I'm looking forward to it. So.
And Envy.
Oh, and Envy. Envy, from what I heard, so when they decided to integrate Space, and they definitely wanted to bring Space in when he turned 18, that means Envy was going to have to sit on the bench for an undefined amount of time. So I think Envy didn't want to do that, and I think he was looking to get traded to a team where he would be a starting role, where he feels like he could be more utilized. So I think that was the team and him working together to sort of like find him. I know they actively tried to trade him. Unfortunately, they couldn't find the trade. I think that was the decision behind his release, because by releasing him, that makes him a free agent, so that teams can keep looking at him. He can join a contenders team. He can do all those things. But if he's just sitting on the bench on the Valiant roster, then nothing's really happening with him. So I think he's more looking at his future of the game rather than just thinking, at least I'm still in Overwatch League.
Fair enough.
Okay. Right. What about then? Let me ask you this first, Monte. So the opening game of the Overwatch League in this stage was the Shanghai Dragons versus the Dallas Fuel, and people might remember this is the game where everyone on the analyst desk decided that it actually isn't a sports league. This is a pantomime. This is a theatre show for children. And they pandered to the audience and said that the Shanghai Dragons would win this match. Shanghai Dragons, who's just lost probably their best player, DPS player, Undead, and has brought in this new Korean from Kongdu. Can you give me some, obviously they're not here to speak for themselves. Can you give me some sort of theory craft? Why were they picking Dragons to win this game?
I don't know. In fact, I had some strong words to discuss with these individuals.
Like it's one thing if one of them picks it, but come on, all three, come on.
I thought that was a little much personally. I think what happened was that there was a lot of discussion around this match previously, because it did seem like now that all of these. So if we rewind time like a few weeks and we looked at it in isolation and said, okay, well, this is probably going to be the best chance for Shanghai to win a match. Right. Sure. But that was before Undead was released from the roster. That was before we didn't know that Dio was not going to be playing because he wasn't back yet. So I think that there were a lot of issues that were overlooked when the match finally came around. I think people were in a mindset of several weeks prior when they thought that this was the best chance for Shanghai to win, and then just sort of stuck with that. It was also before we saw changes on Dallas. It was before they figured out that they could play Mickey at main tank and Seagull on the off tank. So there were fewer main tank issues. I still think there are main tank issues, but there were fewer main tank issues on the Dallas side. So I disagreed with it personally. So all my predictions are also tracked for Watchpoint. And so I predicted Dallas to win that game because I was looking at the situation on the day of that match where there was no more undead and there was no Dia. And there were the alterations to the Dallas roster while OG was suspended that seemed to at least be working. Because if you remember, just at the end of the last stage, Dallas managed to take New York to 5 maps, and they won a map over London. They were actually looking like they were improving. So I said, okay, well, with an extra week, surely they can take out this Shanghai team that is coming in with all these new players, communication issues, language barriers, lack of synergy because they haven't had as much time as Dallas. Even though Dallas has been fraught with all these complications, I still thought it was a pretty safe prediction to go with Dallas in this scenario. Particularly because the 2 best players, the DPS players from Shanghai, were not there. So I disagree with what was said on the desk. I have mentioned this to the desk itself and been like, okay, what the hell happened here? Why was this happening? Because the problem with that scenario is that to a casual viewer, it makes it look like it was an upset that Dallas won, when in my opinion, it was not an upset. You can't have all the people on the desk predict unanimously for a result and then pretend that it wasn't a big upset. I think everybody wants to see the Shanghai Dragons win, and it was clouding their judgment when it came to the actual day of that match.
I mean, you'd think they'd know with Dallas Fuel present in the match that just wanting people to win doesn't mean they actually win the game. We've all tried that. Listen, we've done that. We pulled for you. Now you have to actually win inside the server, and that's the problem, isn't it? Shanghai Dragons doesn't do that.
I think Shanghai did make major upgrades. It's just a matter of figuring out their internal communication.
You have to get the real lineup together, though.
Yeah, exactly. And Dia has to be back from China, so. I don't know. I was disappointed in how that turned out personally, and I also think it not only is it I think not intellectually honest and a problem that you present this as an underdog defeating, like Dallas being an underdog to Shanghai and winning, but it also takes away from when Shanghai actually wins, right? It dilutes the storyline of them improving or pulling off a big upset, because it seems like to the average viewer that they should have been winning this match, which I don't think was a reasonable prediction.
Yeah. Plus, I'll also just say, as someone who's done a lot of predictions in my time myself, you can sometimes get you caught in a trap, which is this. You think to yourself, is there any way this team could win? And then you think, well, sort of maybe this way. And then you try and convince yourself it can happen. But the fact that it is even possible doesn't mean it'll happen. Like, you still got to, at the end, just go with like what can sometimes be the boring but real prediction, which is like, well, for right now, how can anyone predict them to win?
I don't think you can predict Shanghai to win until they actually do it, which is weird. It's weird to say that, but I think they were so much worse than every other team in Overwatch League that until they prove that they can fix their problems with these new players and start to come together with a level of synergy, there's no way you can honestly predict them to win any match.
I think they'll come together eventually. They definitely have talent. I was really impressed by Addo when we played against him. I think he's a really good DPS player. You mix him up with Dia, and I think you have a pretty good DPS duo right there. And I just think the biggest problem between that team is the disconnect between their front line and back line. It's
they're literally speaking different languages.
Speaking different. I actually talked to Seagull, and Seagull sent me a message after they went. He said, we knew that their backline and front line couldn't speak the same language, so we just went for their backline over again.
It worked.
And you saw Effect literally just went on a tear that entire match because they had no way to shut him down. So that's not a problem with the team as much as is they just need more time to learn how to communicate to each other and stuff like that, and sort out their roster as well. You see them flipping around their off tank a little bit. They're trying to work out who they want to play as their backline as well right now. Sky's sort of been, in my eyes, underperforming. Not too unsurprising based on the team that he has to play on, but
he was. To be fair to Sky, he was considered the best flex support in China. So we know that guy is actually good. It's just a matter of getting back into practice and working with the team.
Definitely.
Clockwork, what do you think of the new Dallas then? Because when you look at this team, it doesn't feel like the same team at all. You look at the lineup, they've got Onko, AKM, Seagull all starting in, obviously no Taimu, obviously XQC's long gone. What do you think of the new Dallas?
I think they're going to be better than they were before. I think Seagull is a really good player that was getting underutilized in that team. I think he's a really smart player and he can adapt really well. I think in Overwatch League, a lot of it is about adaptation and how you can, change your play style while the game is going on, and how you can keep a level head while the stage matches are going on. And I think that Seagull is a really good player, a really good candidate for someone who can handle that. I think that AKM is a really good DPS player that was getting underutilized because he is a fantastically good soldier and McCree. And if he is putting the time in, he can definitely open up his repertoire to Genji, and he already is a good Pharah. So he definitely has a lot of hero depth for like the role that he has to be playing. I think it's overall just going to be better. I think that Mickey, I don't know how vocal he is on main tank, but I wasn't really like aware of how vocal he was. Like I'm sure Custa knows, but I imagine him as like a very vocal player if he's playing main tank. I think he's probably going to lead a lot of things, and that'll pull this team together as well. So yeah, they got some new firepower.
It's an interesting thing about Mickey as well, though. I'm not sure like how much play you guys have watched with Mickey, but as a diva, he's probably the most aggressive diva in the league. He's known as, I think he has stats of like he's killed the most supports as diva than like any other support, at least coming out of stage 1. So it was kind of interesting to see that stat. So I think Winston almost suits him better because it means that he is like, that's his job now. Like his job is supposed to be like jump the backline instead of like diva, where you should really be finding that middle ground of aggression and playing defensive. So I think he was actually really good on the Winston play. But I don't think you'll see Mickey on Winston for much longer as soon as OGE comes in.
Yeah. So what are you guys thinking? Based on watching Seagull play, because Seagull has been doing quite well on this off tank. Like you said, Seagull, I think his strength as a player is in his intelligence and his decision-making abilities, which is rewarded by playing diva, for example. Do we think that Mickey's going to go back to playing the off tank role, or is Seagull now assuming the responsibility? Because historically, we also know Seagull's quite a good Zarya player. So he can do more than just play the diva.
Yeah. I think Seagull always had like the wrong idea of himself as a player. I think he was always kind of meant to be a flex tank player, honestly.
Me too.
Like
I was the one leading the charge saying, hey, why is this guy on DPS? He'd be a better support tank player.
Yeah, I agree completely. I mean, like he has good aim, he's a good DPS player, but I don't think he ever will be like the shut down the entire team DPS. I think he's a much stronger player in the sense that he is very critical about his own mistakes. So playing diva, there's small little things that you can do, like, oh, I wasn't matrixing at like this second, and I didn't use rockets for this guy, and I had them off cooldown. And he's very critical about small things like that, and it can make a big difference in gameplay and outcome. So I think that it's a really good suit for him. I think that any hero he plays, he can do the personal feedback for himself to make himself a better player, whether it's on Zarya, Roadhog, Diva, whatever he needs to flex to.
I think Seagull should definitely be given the opportunity to play diva with OG, at least off the bat. I think moving Mickey back to diva off the bat would be a mistake. I think they've played for so long with Mickey, and the team has been struggling so much. I think you should at least give Seagull this opportunity, seeing as he's been playing well in the diva role, to like play with OG and prove his worth. If Seagull isn't playing well, then you always have Mickey to back him up. But I think it would be unfair to Seagull to throw him into the deep end, and then like now that everything's starting to look good, you have OG just like take him out again. So
I agree.
That's on the coaching staff. So we'll see if they see how they deal with it.
Yeah.
Here's another question. Does Mickey stay as a backup main tank, or does he go back to playing off tank, potentially in a starting role, potentially in a backup role? Because he's been doing pretty well. And even before he started playing main tank, we would see him flex to Winston and play Orisa on certain maps instead of playing diva. So we already knew that he was practiced on some of these heroes, at least in a limited capacity.
I think it all comes down to what Mickey wants to do. If he wants to stick with the diva role, or if he wants to go Winston. I honestly think he's probably better suited to the main tank. But if we've learned anything from the entire Taimu situation is if you want to play main tank, you really got to make sure you want to play main tank, because Timo wanted to do it for about 2 weeks and then he didn't want to do it anymore because apparently playing main tank is the most excruciating thing, and I don't envy anyone who has to play main tank.
So let's talk about Taimu. Earlier you said that Taimu doesn't have confidence in his hit scan abilities, and now he doesn't want to play main tank. So what the fuck does Taimu want to do?
That's a very good question, and where Taimu ends up is going to be a very interesting one, because that was sort of the thing. Like, Timo was starting to feel not very confident in his aim. He was, it's one of those things. Your aim is very confidence based. You need to know that you can hit that shot and like not even think about your aim. You just need to hit them. So when we're having this thing and we're like, we need a main tank, Timo was like, Kai approached him. He said, would you like to play main tank? I'm not going to force you to play main tank. This has to be a decision that you want to do and something that you really want to follow through, because I don't want you to feel like I'm forcing you into this role. And so Timo ended up like picking it up. He was really confident. He put a lot of work into it. But at the end of the day, it just didn't suit his style. He wasn't feeling how to play the role, and he was getting frustrated more than he was like learning from his mistakes. So that's why he ended up moving back to DPS. So he's really looking forward to that, and I really hope he sort of gets his confidence back. But yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how that all pans out moving forward and where Timo ends up, like at least in Overwatch. I think he's an incredibly good DPS player, and he just needs to get that mojo back. So.
The confusing thing about Taimu to me was that when you guys were running like your regular roster early on in stage 1, I feel like Taimu was like never playing soldier. It's like a lot of teams were playing soldier tracer, and it's like Taimu never wanted to play it or something. Maybe that was just a thing in practice. I don't really remember like if you went to the stage every single time like what he was playing, but I feel like he wasn't like utilizing himself enough as like a hit scan DPS. It was just really weird because like soldier is such a huge part of the hit scan DPS role, and like there's no reason why he wouldn't be an amazing soldier, and he is like a really good soldier. So it's just kind of confusing like why he wasn't like utilizing that, I don't know, that skill set enough.
Yeah, I don't really know the answer to that one. I think I honestly like he can play soldier. Like I've seen him play soldier. He can definitely play soldier. Like it's not like
he played soldier a lot in contenders.
Yeah, like he can definitely do it. I think Timo's biggest issue is he can't play tracer and he can't play Genji, which is a very important class for either end of the thing. You can either play tracer and play the hit scan, or you can play Genji and play the projectiles and hit scan. So I think he needs to learn one or the other, and I think hopefully moving forward he decides on which one he wants to do.
I think it's a weird like it's like he rationally hates tracer or something. Like he doesn't want to play it for some reason, and I think like he would be good at tracer. Like he has good tracking, he has good aim, so it's weird.
It does seem weird. Like at the moment, all we've found is that out of the many options in Overwatch, Taimu doesn't really want to do any of them. Maybe you want to try out like I don't know, some of the new DLC for Crusader Kings 2 or something. I don't know, Taimu, at this point in time, mate. There's only this game available in the league, mate. You have to pick some role. So, do you like to shoot things? Nah, lost my confidence for that. Maybe you'd like to block people shooting things. Remember how annoying that is when they block you? It's hard though, isn't it? Do you want to heal people? Nah, why would I want to do that? I think it's time for you to retire. Sorry. I mean, I've run you through the floor chart there. There's no line that comes out of any of these boxes when you've said no to all those things that says no problem starting spot in the Overwatch League still. Unless, here's what you do, Taimu. If you want to rescue your career, be the storyline every week in the Overwatch League and be amazing, and it won't be your fault if you lose. Join the Shanghai Dragons. There's the fucking move. Why not? People in China would fucking love Taimu. I guarantee.
I'd love to see Timo in red. That'd be an interesting storyline.
I'd fucking go ham for him.
Just add a few more language barriers there.
Why not? Yeah. Oh no, not only that. Yeah, exactly, Monty. Just to make it completely crazy, like. Bearing in mind, he's never going to be able to learn Korean or Chinese. Just have him speak in Finnish. Like, they're not going to understand anyway. Just have him just scream and shout. And then
by the way,
just make it chaos.
It would be the Taimu dream to be on Shanghai anyway, because we know how they played around Undead, which was give Undead all of the resources, pocket Undead with damage boosted mercy at all times, every single fight.
Back. Yeah, massage this guy.
He'll look like a fucking god.
Exactly. Right, okay, what do you think about, obviously, another team which has got all these new players to insert is the San Francisco Shock. Now, we still haven't seen their full lineup because obviously Architect isn't there yet, and actually they just signed this Flex Tank player, but finally, after all the fanfare, we have gotten to see Super and Sinatra play in the Overwatch League. Clockwork. These are guys where, understandably, it's pretty obvious from the first two stages. Like, San Francisco was sort of betting on this. Like, even if their team didn't do that well, they could always be like, yeah, but when these guys come in, what do you make of them in the Overwatch League?
I think the biggest change is going to be Super. I think Super is like an incredibly good main tank. I think he was always like the like second or first best main tank, like in NA before Muma started making his name known. I think like Super was incredible when he played on LG Evil. I think Sinatra is a good addition, but I also think that Dante was incredibly good at Tracer, and I think that it's just kind of like fortuitous the way it worked out now because we're in like a Tracer Sombra sort of meta, and like Dante's also incredibly good at Sombra, so you can run Sinatra on Tracer without feeling bad about taking Dante off of Tracer because Dante has to play Sombra anyway. So I think it works out in that sense. But I think that they were betting on it, but in a weird way because Dante kind of made his name known for being really good Tracer. Like as the stage went on, as the stages went on, he got better and better and better at Tracer. And it was like, okay, well, do we actually even need Sinatra now? Because I mean, Sinatra played well.
How dare you? How dare you ask that question?
Don't be ridiculous. Blasphemy.
Have you not heard about our Lord Sinatra, the new fucking the savior once promised?
Because like Sinatra played really well, but I mean, like Dante has consistently played well in every single game they played on Tracer, right? So.
Well, but that wasn't reasonable. When they signed this player, Dante was ostensibly supposed to be a holdover for Sinatra. Right. No one thought Dante was going to get that good because you thought there was always going to be a big difference. We're just going to wait for Sinatra. But by the end, there's basically no difference between the two players right now because they're both very good players. And like you said, it has been, I think, fortuitous for them that they have stumbled into a Tracer Sombra meta, which is absolutely fantastic for them. And not only that, but what was their main weakness? Like Baby Bay was always a great soldier player, always a great Widowmaker player, but they didn't really have a good Genji player. Here comes Architect, they've actually built this team very well for the current point in time. So they will be able to finally play dive because the primary issues with San Francisco Shock in the last couple of stages was they were super predictable in terms of what they were going to run. They were always going to play Tracer Widow or Tracer Soldier, basically. They were playing poke compositions virtually exclusively. Yes, occasionally they'd throw in some Junkrat, but I would say probably 80% of the time they were running that. And the other problem is that they didn't have any kind of aggressive dive, right? They couldn't play dive at all. Nomi is a very passive tank, although I think he did get a lot better towards the end of stage 2. But San Francisco would get an advantage. They were the most frustrating team to watch because you'd see Baby Bay hit a great headshot. Okay, it's a 6 versus 5 in favor of San Francisco. And then they would just stand there and not press their advantage because their tanks would not go in. Like they wouldn't chase people down. So they'd wait until that person respawned and came back to the fight and then lose the fight 6 versus 6. So they had no ability to follow up or to play aggressively. And Super brings that. And I think you're right. That's what's going to be the biggest difference maker is that now San Francisco can capitalize on the advantages they had. I would just rage like watching their game sometime. Like, why the fuck aren't you going in? What the hell's going on with you guys? You realize you have an advantage. You just killed somebody. Fucking follow up.
I think something that is undersaid about Shock as well is I think Moth has done a really good job of adding consistency to like that role as well. I think he's a really good Mercy. His Lucio is really solid as well. So I think that was something that they were sort of struggling with like earlier in stage 2 with like Dak. He was okay, but like he was definitely had some games where it was really hard. So I think
he was probably the worst Mercy player in the.
Okay. Yeah. Well, he definitely had some very bad matches on Mercy. So like that is we can all agree on that. So, but I think they come into the Sombra meta and then you bring in like Architect coming. I think the biggest struggle that I think Shock's going to have is finding how to play all 4 DPS players, because you say they can play Sombra, Tracer, they can play Dive with Genji, they can play Widow Soldier, but that means they have to make it very clear going into every map exactly what they're going to play, because they have a very specific way of playing based on which player is in. So
but that only depends on what Architect's hero pool is right now, which I don't know. So in the past, he has been good at playing McCree, so we know he has some hit scan capabilities, but I don't know how good he is, say, at Sombra right now. No idea. I don't know how good he is at Widow right now. So these are things that could change.
True. I was thinking him as a
we are making an assumption that he is only going to play Genji, which he probably won't. But at the same time, I don't know where he's been practicing. So that'll be super interesting.
I think I think it'll be obvious like who they're running, or might be obvious who they're running based on the map that they're playing. Because I think Baby Bay is always going to be their best hit scan player. The guy is like really incredibly good at Soldier and McCree. Like I don't think Architect, even if he plays those roles, will be able to like overtake him in that sense. Maybe if there's a map where you run Genji most of the time, then like maybe you switch to McCree on like the last stage or something, last part of the stage map. Then you would run Architect or something. But I think like if you know that it's a heavy hit scan map, it's going to be Baby Bay, because he's just by far their best hit scan player. Maybe Widow. I don't know. His Widow is good, but some stats suggest that he's not the best counter Widow in the game. So who knows about that? But I think he's their best hit scan player by far.
I mean, I think that his counter Widow stats are somewhat
skewed for sure. I mean, all the stats
they're skewed because when you don't have a tank line to harass the other Widowmaker, you are going to be much more vulnerable to losing those duels. So I think there are some. I would be curious to see now that Super is starting, how much that changes.
Yeah, I think there's like a lot of things that skew stats. Like the tank line, the fact that they lose a lot of their games. So if they're losing their games, you're going to die more often. Like it can't even be like a Widow 1v1, like the Widow, maybe he's probably grappling away and he gets headshot because his team's dead, So it's like there's a lot of ways to skew the stats.
Okay. So one of the teams who last stage, right up until the very end, looked like the best Western team was the Los Angeles Gladiators. Obviously bringing in Fisher. They seemed like they'd improved so much. They have now been the people who've just resurrected Silk Thread from the dead. I mean, there was these stories before saying he wasn't going to play in Overwatch League. He's come to the Gladiators. He's already starting on the Gladiators. He's played in their games already. What do you think of the Gladiators, Custa? What do you think of this team?
I think they started really well with Fisher. I think Fisher did a really good job at the start of that stage, just like commanding the team. Everyone just listened to what Fisher wanted to do. It was the Fisher show, and it all worked really well. They were diving really well. I think just like it happens with every team when you have like a lot of Koreans, that as soon as you start losing, it's really hard to communicate to each other like how you want to improve, and like it creates this divide. So I have no idea what the internals of Gladiators are, but it feels like over the last towards the end of stage 2 and like the start of this week, it feels like they're not where they were at the start of stage 2. So I'm hoping that they pull it together. They have like a lot of like talented players like within that roster. I don't 100% know where Silk Thread fits in that roster, like because who do you have now? You have Hydration, Asher, Shore4.
Well, Hydration hasn't even been playing.
Yeah, but does that mean Silk Thread's going to be playing Genji as well?
Well, I think that what's weird about it is that he has played Genji in their matches, and I think that's the idea, is that if you have Hydration, he can't play some of the hit scan heroes that Silk Thread can play. So, like, for example, Silk Thread was playing Sombra, which typically Surefour has played on the Gladiators. But if they want to run Tracer Sombra, then they've been running like Asher with Silk Thread, and then Silk Thread can also flex into Projectile. So I think why they're using Silk Thread is that he has a larger hero pool than Hydration. And he's not more of a pure projectile player like Hydration is. He can go to the Soldier, he can go to the Sombra, but he's not as good at those projectile heroes as Hydration is either, right? When we think about Hydration, he's one of the best Pharahs in the league. Yeah. He's been a good Genji player. He can bring out that pocket Doomfist, which has won them games, honestly. Like, it surprises the shit out of people, and he's super good at playing that hero. But we haven't really seen him. Maybe they're just testing Silk Thread right now to see what he brings. He is more versatile.
Do you think Hydration just pretty much takes his spot as like a Pharaoh one trick almost at this point, or for like Koth games and stuff?
I don't know. I mean, they weren't using him on King of the Hill like previously. Silk Thread was the one playing the Junkrat, say, against the Dallas Fuel on Nepal earlier this week. So I'm not sure how they're going to use him. It is a little bit interesting. Silk Thread also played a little bit of Pharah. So I don't know. That's just my theory, is that on this map pool, maybe you need more of a flexibility between the Genji and a Sombra potentially.
Yeah, it's possible. I think the only way.
Oh, sorry, yeah, go on.
I was gonna say I think the only way they could utilize all their players is if they like transform some of them into like one tricks, and then there's always the whole subbing in during a match fiasco where you just lose a lot of your momentum and stuff. So it's a tricky thing to do to utilize all their players. So maybe they're just going on a stage by stage basis.
Could also be a communication thing. Silk Thread, I think. Hydration is a man of few words. Let's put it that way. Perhaps Silk Thread is more active in their comms or something like that. I don't know.
It would obviously have been a bit unreasonable to think that Fisher would arrive and they would just instantly become like one of the absolute best teams. Do you think that people basically figured out how to play against them now with Fisher?
Yeah, they focus Fisher.
Yeah. If Fisher can't move, then it makes it really hard for him to tell everyone else what to do, right?
And speaking of Fisher not being able to move, this is not a great patch for Winston players because they get hacked whenever. So one of the things that Fisher was great at was effectively using the Winston ultimate. The problem with this patch is if you are playing against a Sombra, when you trigger your Primal Rage and you jump in, you have no way to disable the hack because you only have a melee range attack. So once the Winston jumps in, if the Sombra is within hacking distance, it's like a guaranteed hack, basically, unless there's another player shooting the Sombra. So if you're hiding and waiting for a Winston to engage with Primal, you just get hacked instantly, and then all of a sudden Fisher is useless. He just stands there waving his arms around. Like, it's, if you are a Winston player that relies on effective Primal Rage use, you are fucked in this patch.
Or, ever wanting to play D.Va. It's the same thing with D.Va. Like, it's impossible to play these like front aggressive tank lines against
At
Sombra.
least D.Va can shoot the Sombra and stop hacking, okay? There's like a chance for counterplay. If you're in Primal and you're alone, there's nothing you can do.
But you can give the enemy team ultimates. That's a nice thing.
Exactly. Yeah. You can give, you're like, all of a sudden you're 1,000 battery that's just like getting farmed in the front line.
Well, not to worry. Luckily, the player in question isn't from a totally different culture with incredibly high expectations on himself and what his teammates should play like, and possibly a fiery attitude. So anyway, when does Void get here? When do the other Koreans come?
But I think that that's going to be a problem for them and also potentially teams like Boston, where Gamsu has a very high efficiency with his Primal Rage, because you have to have somebody going in with that Winston player to protect him from getting hacked. Otherwise, you just get screwed.
Well, speaking of Boston, I mean, they actually didn't get the memo, Monte, that apparently Fusion's like the future, an amazing team, all this potential. They won that game, and then they also beat the Houston Outlaws. And Boston is a team that people thought was kind of on the way back down again. I mean, they'd had the issues in stage 2, figuring out what to do, even some of the roles.
Well,
where do you think they're at?
To be fair to Boston, they have won every single match since Gamsu came back. So when they were doing shitty, Gamsu wasn't there. He was in Korea. And now that he's back, they've been undefeated since.
Did we ever get an explanation as to why that was?
Of course not. Of course not.
Is Gamsu the Korean Mendo? What's going on right now? I need some answers. What's going on? Where was he?
He was in Korea for reasons unknown because he needed a break, apparently, because he couldn't take a break when there was an actual break. I don't know. It was a weird explanation. I don't think we're ever really going to get an answer to that question. But he is back. He is playing well. Dream Casper is turned into a really fucking good player. And I think we do have to take the Philadelphia match with a grain of salt because EQO is on suspension, so he can't play. So they are forced into like Widow Tracer basically every match. It's not, they don't have the same flexibility that they had with EQO. So I don't know how that result in particular. We'll just wait to see how it goes later in the season. But Boston did look really impressive against Houston. Their Dreamcaster's Farah play continues to be sensational.
I think Boston's going to be definitely I would say in the top like 4 or 5 for this stage. I think they've been playing really well. I think I think the dive is still really strong, and with Dream like having the flexibility that he does, like is really going to like be an asset to that team in this meta. So I think they'll do really well this stage.
I agree.
How well is really well though?
As a top 4 or 5, I think like they could easily make stage playoffs. Like maybe Seoul doesn't get their footing back. Yeah, like we have no idea. Maybe London. Like you might even see 2 Western teams play against New York. Actually, is it top 4 now?
Top 4, yes.
Yeah, top 4 went through. So I don't know. Like I think they could easily make stage playoffs and make some waves. So they've been a pretty consistent team throughout this season, but they've never been the team that you're expecting to beat like the top. So maybe they'll change that in this stage.
Yeah, but you have to remember, this is something actually we've never brought up on the show, Monty. The format is very bizarre, where what happens is the second and third team do play in a match like they already did, but then what happens is the top team picks one of the other. No, it's not the second and third. The top team picks one of the other 3, whoever they want. So they're incentivized to pick whoever they think is the worst of the 3, and then the other 2 play a semi-final, and then we get a final.
Yep.
So it's kind of got like a mixture of when we alluded to before in StarCraft, where you could actually sort of like have some say as to who you played, but then also a normal bracket.
I was partially responsible for that. There were conversations about format, and the idea was, and I pushed for this format. Okay. So the idea was that you wanted to expand to 4 teams in the playoffs, because now it was on a different day, so there was more of an opportunity to have these matches. So the idea was it was going to be more interesting to have 4 teams involved. But the problem is that you had previously put in a format where you weighted the first place team because they didn't have to play the first match. So the idea was to still reward the first place team in some capacity. So to give them the opportunity to pick their opponent meant that they could pick a favorable matchup if they didn't want to play the 4th place team for whatever reason. Maybe the 4th place team was getting hot at the end of the stage and barely made it to the playoffs, but had won like their last 6 in a row, which could definitely happen. Maybe it was a bad matchup historically where that team, like for example, London and Houston, or even though they did beat them in the playoff match where it was mattered. I actually think the regular season games matter more because it actually gets you to real playoffs as opposed to just some money. So that was kind of the logic behind it. And also, I wanted to bring back the opportunity for some trash talking around the stage playoffs as teams were selecting each other, because that's always fun as fuck. So
yeah, I really like that.
I pushed for this. So I think people enjoy it.
I think Overwatch is a great game in where the ability to choose an opponent is like a massive advantage, right? Like, because there's like, think about it, if London finishes first in this playoffs, New York sucks, and for whatever they don't finish first. Do you think London's ever going to pick Houston if Houston's in the top 4? No, like it gives them the opportunity to pick someone else and then like hope that the other team beats like Houston. So I think the amount of counterplay and the amount of like weird choices that you can have like coming out of these playoffs is going to be really interesting. So should be a bit of fun.
Or even matchups that have been very one-sided. For example, like London dominates Seoul every time they play them.
Yeah.
Sure. Here's the thing, Monty. On the one hand, first of all, now that 4 teams make it, what a coincidence. Now Seoul can actually go to the playoffs. This just worked out exactly how we wanted it. Secondly, conspiracy theory there. I should have like a special voice when I do the conspiracy theory one. And then the real one, which will sound like a conspiracy theory, but I guarantee you, just watch. Not just because Koreans in general have been the best teams, but if you know how Koreans operate, I would be very surprised if the number 1 team ever picks another Korean team anywhere. Like, I think generally they'll always pick the foreign team. Whoever number 1 is, I guarantee they pick the non-Korean team.
I don't know. You say that, but there have been times in these group selections in StarCraft where players have intentionally made groups of death just because they want to trash talk each other. And I think there is an advantage when you have to play back-to-back matches. Let's say you're not scared of the other two teams at all, but you are really scared of one team. Wouldn't it be better to play them first while you're fresh and maybe have that preparation and then try and coast to an easier match in the finals? There are strategies here where you could imagine that happening.
I think all the Korean coaches just get together like that. We all agree we're all Korean, and your duty as the first place Korean team is to eliminate the non-Koreans. Now,
They do think that way a lot of the time.
you know, if you've ever seen any sort of sport that involves like group voting or whatever, like it's rife in Korea. I'm telling you, it's outrageous. So anyway, right, getting back to the topic. So we were talking about the Boston uprising there. Let me see. Who do they actually play this week? So they play New York actually in their next match. Do you think Boston actually has a chance to beat New York Clockwork?
I don't no. I don't know. I don't think anyone has a chance to beat New York.
No one. Just write that off already.
Not right now. Not right now. Anyway, like until I think maybe like I don't know. They could, but I think it's easier for them to start losing once they like get damaged a little bit. Like maybe if Boston brings them to like 2-3 or something, you know, like the next few games, if they play strong teams, they can feel themselves becoming less confident. But I think like rolling off of their last win against London, I think they're going to come in really hot, and I think they're going to win like probably 3-1 or something. I'd imagine. I think like Anubis. Do they play them on Anubis? You know, because Boston's really good at Anubis.
No, they
actually
Numbani, Ilios, and Junkatown.
Boston is actually undefeated on both Anubis and Volskaya.
And Volskaya. Yeah.
They've
So I think
all of those maps.
Yeah, they're really, really good at 2CP. So I think that's their map that they definitely want to win. They could definitely upset on another one, but I think I would predict them to win the 2CP and then probably lose the rest. So 3-1.
That series, like you're saying, is going to be decided in the first map, because if Boston loses Assault, they're done. That's it.
Yeah.
They have to win Assault if they're going to win that series.
Yeah, I agree.
It's kind of interesting because like Boston theoretically match up pretty good against New York, because Boston probably has the cleanest dive in the league, right? But New York has the best defensive play in the league. So it's like, can Boston get close enough to Jonak before he kills everyone? And it's like, that's sort of the question. Is Boston clean enough to be able to shut down Jonak, or is it going to just like not come through? So it'll be interesting to see if Boston can do it. I don't know what they've previously matched up like. I don't have that like stat on mine.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you guys, you've talked about New York being, you can't see a team beating them. So what, in your experience, having played against New York, makes them so strong? Why are they such a dominant force right now in Overwatch League?
I think they put all their resources around protecting Jonak. Like you see, like Mano is the most like selfless player ever. He's like playing intentionally aggressive and taking away that. And then Meko is like always protecting like Jonak. Like if you've ever played again, and then Sabiolbi like protects the flanks from the other traces. So they give so much resources to protecting Jonak and making Jonak as strong as possible, and like denying space from the enemy teams, that you either have to leave Jonak alone or you have to dive him. And if you leave Jonak alone, he's going to kill your entire team unless you can find a way to destroy the tanks. Or you need to have a clean enough dive and a good enough like assault to kill Jonak. So, and that's what people haven't really figured out how to beat yet, because Jonak's aim is just so strong, and his ability to just kill DPS and stuff is like on another level. So the team's been doing this since the first stage. Like I think they're the only team in the league that has never changed their style of play. They've been doing this since day one, and I think no team's figured out how to beat it yet. And I think it'll be a really interesting day when one team does. So
what I love is how this is how you know New York is like the evil empire, and they are like just the low-key best team in the whole league. Is everyone has to try and mind fuck themselves into a way that they're not the best. Like we had so many people on this show who were like, no, this meta, it's going to be the Seoul Dynasty all day long. And then someone else, actually I think London Spitfires was always the best, you know, and like they should win all the stages. And then all you see is it just comes back to, well, we'll wait for them to cool off again. Oh, New York wins everything again. Good. Sound. No upsets there.
New York just has like two extremely world-class, like best in their role players on their team. Let's say Biolby being the Tracer and Jonak the Zen. So it's so hard to do something to that team, because they work so well together off of what their strengths are too. Like if you don't jump Jonak, you don't dive him, he just kills everything.
Yeah.
If you do dive him, say BLB just shoots you in the back while you dive him, and then they survive anyway, and they roll you. So it's like, it's just so hard to counterplay them. Their tanks play it so well. Like, even if your plan is to shoot the tanks, they find a way to manage their HP so well. Like, you know, a Winston will jump away with like 50 HP, and then Mecho's their body blocking instead. And then by the time Mecho's about to die, Mano comes back in, or Janus comes back in. It's insane, like, how good they are at playing together and peeling for each other. It's just so hard, especially in a meta where there are a lot of good dive teams, and that's what they rely on. It is so hard to beat them because you just can't dive them. They just
the funniest thing about all this, and the reason that New York is so good, is we've talked about 5 players doing these amazing things as a team, and then you have Libero doing whatever the fuck he wants.
You
don't have the ability to focus Libero because you have to do everything else. So Libero has the freest space in the world, and like he's been really popping off lately and like showing that he's taking that space to the next thing. So it makes it really hard to do that. And the thing that makes New York so weird is no one else plays like New York. No one else plays this style. So
no one has Jonak, mate.
Yeah, no one has Jonak, exactly. So you can't play like they play. So it makes it really hard. You have to go into that match playing not your style to beat a team that is playing their own style. So you're going against the grain already, which makes it that much harder.
Yeah.
So with the way we talk about Jonak, is the only hope for teams to beat New York for these Zenyatta nerfs to come through, to volley, to lower some of that damage out?
That's not going to stop him. It's the nerf isn't that big.
I agree.
Yeah, but here's the thing I would ask though: is like, is it even fair to nerf Zenyatta in that sense though? Because like, for example, I've seen all these other Korean Zenyatas; they don't do any of this stuff. What, just because one guy's really good, we have to fucking nerf the whole hero? It doesn't seem fair.
Look, I do think it's bullshit that you can randomly just charge right clicks and the tracer walks around a corner and just one shot.
Is he doing
I think
those
it's
randomly
stupid.
though?
He's not
gets
doing
a
it
lot of
randomly,
them.
but it's like, it's so mind-boggling to me. You got it.
No, I just think that when heroes like Junkrat or Zenyatta, where you can just charge a right click and fire it around a corner every few seconds and catch somebody who has no way of counterplaying this is bullshit.
Yeah. I don't think
4 out of 5 of them. It's just the 1 out of 5 that matters, right?
I don't think that like tendencies like that are good for this game specifically, because if you lose a player, it's like so catastrophic. So if you're like setting up a push and you get right clicked across the map, it's like, I guess let's rinse and repeat, wait for him to respawn, and then like while you're respawning, you get chunked more by Zenyatta. Yeah. So it's just like it's crazy. I think it's mind-boggling if you think about it that like the best tracers and the best everything in the game, Zens in the game, still get right-clicked across the entire map and die.
Yes. I will say that the part that doesn't make sense about that is obviously that it's not even a play you have to think about, like, oh, what's the negative if I miss this, where no one came around the corner, so it's no problem. So that is a flaw. You know? You don't lose anything for doing it, basically.
That said, even if there was fall-off damage, which I think is the best way to deal with the right-click, I think that's not what makes Jonak. I mean, Jonak obviously hits those like many other Zenyatas do, but the problem is with Jonak is why he's great is that once you engage in a team fight, he's like headshotting all of your players, and that's not going to change even if you nerf Zen. He's still going to hit all those shots.
Yeah, Jonak's right click isn't what makes him like the best player in the world. Like he's very good at them, but like I would almost say Sleepy is on the same level of like right clicks from a distance as Jonak is, but like Sleepy has nowhere near as good a close game as Jonak does. So
I agree completely. Sleepy is an incredible right clicker though. I think like I've never been right clicked more by Zen in the game.
I agree.
My problem with Sleepy is that I feel like he's overly aggressive in his peaking at times, because if you actually look at what against Jonak is like destroying him across the map because he's playing like this very risky style. He can be punished by good enemy Zens or Widows.
Yeah, I think he goes for a lot of flanks too when he doesn't have to. I think he tries to like play a lot like Korean Zens where they go for like flank plays when they need to, but he doesn't like quite have the timing down and stuff, and you just find him like flanking your team while like the fight's already over. I think he needs to like work on his flank timing and stuff, but like as far as right clicks go, he's like incredible.
I think I remember hearing him say that he watches like a lot of Jonak and he watches a lot of his boards, so he's trying to like mimic his playstyle, but obviously like you're never going to do it as well as the player who does it.
Yeah.
Guys, can I have all the resources now? I've been watching a lot of Jonak VODs. Can I have them all? All right, wait. Nobles and Yatas don't get those? Shit.
So I guess the question that has to be asked then, given all our talk about New York, is Jonak the best player in Overwatch League?
I would say yes, seeing his ability to play other classes as well. It's not like he can play any of the supports at like a world-class level, and then he can also play DPS. Like, I think he's probably he's probably the most well-rounded player in all of Overwatch, I would say. I don't think anyone else can test him for that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's like hard though, because if you would have to like rank, I think it's easier to like rank DPS separate from the rest of the cast too. Because I think Carpe has been one of like the best DPS in the game in Overwatch League, and I think his name has to be up there.
Plus, obviously, Jonak is just such a mismatch for anyone compared to his role that it seems like since that's the biggest mismatch, then automatically he wins. But yeah, in the same sense, it's hard to rank like the DPS players against that. What do you think, Monte?
I think that we've seen him play. Obviously, he made his name on the ladder playing Ana and not Zenyatta, which is why it's so interesting that he's become such a good Zenyatta player, because he was more or less an Ana main before actually joining up with this professional team. So I think it's really hard to say, because he doesn't really ever have to have a super deep hero pool when we compare him to star DPS players that must have greater versatility. But I think that he is the most, I don't know if I think he's the best player. He's certainly in the conversation. He is definitely the most impactful.
Yeah, impactful. Yeah, I agree. Influential, for sure.
Because of how far ahead of like all the other Zenzi is, like he does so much more work than like everyone else. Like even the best DPS players, like compared to like the other DPS players, like the differences aren't as impactful as his Zen differences.
Yeah. The stupid thing about Jonak is like he can do more damage in a map than the enemy team's 2 DPS. Like I've seen this. We have live stats while we're casting, and there are many times where I look down and Jonak has done more damage than the enemy team's DPS. And I'm just like, what the fuck is this?
I think the thing you need to remember though is the reason I still think he's the best Zen in the game, regardless of what I'm about to say, but his stats are inflated by the fact that his team does play the style that they do, where it is very pocket Jonak and protective.
Yeah, he gets damage boosted all the time.
Do you think is there another player you could do that with? And it doesn't have to be as good a result, but have comparable style. Is there anyone that you could do that with?
I mean, Shanghai tried to do it with Undead. That's how they spent their first, like all of stage 2 playing.
That was such a weird thing to play against. Like it's like either Undead kills 6 of them or their team feeds. Like it was kind of weird to play against.
I don't think it was a good idea, but they tried.
They tried, yeah.
Desperate measures.
I don't know as far as Zenyatta's go. I mean, I think we've been trying to do that more with Raucus, and he's been happier about it, because he can definitely take over the game too on Zenyatta. But I don't really know like Jaehong, but he hasn't really.
Jaehong's a much more passive Zen than Jonak is.
Yeah. So it's like hard. It's really hard. I know like Jaehong has like the mechanics for it, but it doesn't suit his style.
You've also got to have
Bidoshin kind of gets that though a little bit.
Yeah.
Bidoshin has the aggressive style without the team pocket. Like that's sort of how he plays. He sort of plays a more, instead of playing passive and like staying alive that way, he plays like the flanking aggressive style where it's like, surprise, I'm behind you with a right click and I killed your like Mercy and shit like that. So it's kind of like self-sacrificing in a way at times. So I don't know. I don't think it's a way that a single player can play. It needs to be the entire team mindset that you're going to play that way.
You need like really self-sufficient DPS players too. Like the way CBLB and Libero play, they don't really take as many resources as other DPS players would. Like CBLB is always finding a hiding spot and waiting around a corner, and it's like where other tracers would just be spamming with an orb the entire time, and like a Mercy ready to like kill him if he has to run out. Like CBLB is just so self-sufficient, and same with Libero. So.
Should we be worried about the London Spitfire? Obviously, they lost this game to Houston, and then they got wrecked by New York. Admittedly, harder schedule than some of the other teams, but even so, are there concerns to be had about the London Spitfire?
Yeah,
They
I think
look
their
pretty-
playstyle is weird.
They just look demoralized. That's like if you, what was it, like the Hex tweet where he said like that Junkertown map that they played, the last one of the last map, it was kind of hard to watch. Like it didn't even seem like they were playing like the game at that point. It was just a clean walk from New York. So I think it's all about, it's the same issue that we had on Dallas. Like it's just they need to get their confidence back. They need to get their you got to start believing in your teammates. You got to start finding that. So I have no idea what the inner workings of London is like, but if it's at like a toxic point, then it's pretty hard to come back from that without some major changes.
Monte, they played 10 players in this game. So none of that worked.
Oh,
So,
God, dude.
what's going on?
We talked about this a little bit earlier. I don't know what's their roster switch-ups. I think, as I said before, that they just need to stick with the starting 6 that have worked for them, or 5 and then Wuhyal or Fury. I think that's pretty interchangeable and not the issue, but I would like to see them stick with Gesture, Prophet, Birdring, Nuss, and Bedosian. So I think you just have to go back to the basics and build up from there, and I don't know, like...
It's definitely something for the coaching staff to figure out, I think. That
there's some obviously weird stuff
things
that must be going down within that roster in order to have them do all of these swaps, when I think it's incredibly clear that Bedosian and Nuss are significantly better than Hagapun and Closer, and I don't know why they would be playing them right now.
Like the Fury one, I'm with you on that one. He has had some good games. He can be a good player. I could see why you might sometimes bring him in, but tis bizarre with the amount of talent, the amount of moves they also make. Because this is also the team, obviously, where, as I referenced before, they have fucked around bringing in what's like the equivalent of the B team against the lesser squads that they thought they could beat. Obviously, they did it last stage against Gladiators when they didn't know Gladiators was going to be really good. That ended up costing them, if you look overall how things went. Like where do you think they are as a team right now? Are they still elite tier, though? Are they still like top 2, top 3? Should they still sweep through most teams?
I think so. I mean, I don't know. It's hard to say because, again, like they're just not good at playing against our team. So it's like...
No, they are.
Think that
they are when they play Junkrat.
Yeah, when they play Junkrat. Yeah.
They've proven they can beat you, but to me, it looks like they're never going in, not only with a solid roster. Yeah, I mean, we touched on this earlier. We touched on this, how they seem so stubborn when they come into a game. They're just going to run that game plan into the ground, and if it works, it works, and if it doesn't, they're just going to keep doing it, and it won't. So they need to be more flexible in game.
Yeah, I agree.
Because here's the thing. When I just looked at the schedule now, and this is perfect because Philadelphia's 4th game is against London Spitfire, and if you remember, EQO was actually suspended for 3 games, so that should in theory be the first game he can play. So it could be the real Philadelphia team against London Spitfire. Is Fusion going to beat them this time around?
I think if London play anything like they're playing in the first week, then I think they will lose to Philly. I think EQO adds a lot to that team, and I would be very worried as a London player unless they start working out, because you can't make 10 switches in a match and expect to ever win. I just think it's way too many.
Definitely.
They're obviously grasping at straws at that point.
Unless they just engage with the Philadelphia Fusion players when they're streaming, just try and lure them into jokes that are culturally related, try and get them into some sort of area that they're not
push EQO to a point that he doesn't want to go.
At this point, what do we have to do in some of these Western teams? Do we just need literally a guy sat there with a fucking megaphone who's the culturally appropriate officer? He's like, that's inappropriate. Stop doing that. Stop. That's not funny. Don't deliver that punchline. That'll end your career. Stop.
I don't know. How many people have got banned for culturally done?
It's got to be 3 or 4 at least, hasn't it?
It's 3 or 4. Tyrone, it was Tyrone, EQO,
Yes.
XCC twice. Yeah, I don't know if there's many others. Yeah, it's just I just think it's a lot of people that don't really understand what they're doing is wrong and that kind of stuff. Like I've talked to Felix XCC about like a lot of his things, and he doesn't understand that what he is saying is that bad most of the time, and it's just like it's kind of hard to like get it through his head at times. So
no, the key thing is here. You think
the problem with XQC is that he doesn't understand why it's wrong in the first place, and then he goes out legitimately and asks people why it was wrong and wants a legitimate answer, then decides that he's right and doubles down on his first statement. It's really weird.
Yeah. He's definitely has some really weird things when it comes to like these kind of like PR kind of issues. So at least we don't have to deal with that nightmare anymore in Overwatch League, as much as it was a wild ride.
The only thing is, as much as I presented it there as though it was like, they just don't understand the culture. Like actually, when I think of the list of players, when you run them down there, you got like Taimu, you got XQC, you got EQO. Like I get the feeling, even if you went to these guys' home village where they're born, the people there are like, no, that guy's a weird fucker. Like we never got that guy from day one. It's not that they've just come to America and they don't understand the culture there. Like I don't know if I'm buying that actually. I think there's special cases. That's all you need to know. There's special people. They needed some extra hugs and someone to look after them. Someone to just tell them it's okay to not be edgy all the time. Why didn't you do that for me, Monte? Yeah, exactly.
What do you mean I did try and do that for you? What the about?
No, here's the thing, Monte.
Conversations have we had about
That's
this?
That's true. But I can't lie. There have been many times. Like for example, many years ago, you guys might be amazed by this. I once actually made a comparison where I gave an analogy about someone's character, about what he's like as a person. And it just so happened the person I was comparing him to was an ape, because it was someone from the movie Planet of the Apes. Now, in no way did I compare this person's physical appearance or them to an ape. I actually compared a character trait. But, I mean, first of all, on that one, people did go as deep as you can go to try and make that. Like, they were like, oh, but 45 years ago in this area of the world, there was a subtext that could mean you were a monkey. Like, come on, mate, no one's ever heard of this one. This isn't even like a famous thing. But I will say, after that, Monte did just message me something like, it's just unnecessary, isn't it? Like, there's not really any reason to do it. And I was sort of like, haha, yeah, I'm still going to do all that stuff. So I'm not saying he never tried, Monte. Let that never be said. You did try. You tried. So.
That's not the only time I have tried.
But it didn't stop me.
You are incorrigible.
Exactly. Maybe I've learned that that's just the way it is. Luckily, I don't represent an Overwatch team, though, so I just represent myself. And you know what? My boss is perfectly fine, with our PR image being shit. So don't worry, it's all fine in my org. I do represent the values that the Thorin organization represents. They're just not your values. Right. What about this then? So one of the teams we haven't addressed at all is the Florida Mayhem. And on this team, Monte, I'm actually really shocked by this, because if you remember, I think it was on the last episode we did. I think, and I don't want to get this wrong, but I think Beezy actually even said something like Florida was already improving, and who knows even if they need Sire player or something. And I was like, even at the time, I was sort of looking like, are you aware who Sire player actually is? Like, have you ever watched OGNA? But he was pretty good. Was it like, it's not like it was just the guy playing the Zarya who was good in that team. Like, he did have a pretty good team around him. What do you think about this Florida Mayhem squad, Monte? This looked like pretty good in the first outing, right?
Yeah, I think they're going to improve. I think it'll take time to adjust with having Saya player in the roster. He didn't play great in their second match up until the last map where he popped off on Route 66. But on an individual level, this guy has always been great. That was kind of
exciting, right? As a potential thing for the future to have that. They didn't have anything like that in this team before.
I don't really know why they're playing Tavik and Saya player on a lot of these maps instead of playing Logix and Saya player, which you would think would be the more natural Tracer Widow combination. Because Tavik was playing Tracer, probably because Tavik is also the Sombra player, and they can flex Tavik onto Genji, I guess, in some situations. But I think it'd be nice to see what Logic Saya player looks like together. That's what I really want to have come out of this. I'm curious when they add Awesome Guy, how that's going to adjust their lineup as well. But should be a team still struggling, I think, with communication issues and synergy. But on an individual level, Saya's great.
I don't think DPS was always the major issue of the Mayhem. I think they got like some other issues like within that roster. Like I think their tank line has like struggled at times, and like same with the supports. Like I think there's like having side player is definitely a nice addition. It's not going to hurt, but I think moving forward for that team to like really like turn it around and start like contesting like the higher up teams, is they really need to sort of like round out the roster really well and like pick up as many players as they can that are really going to like help them in the tank and support line.
Yeah, I agree. I think especially with the way stage 1 went, with Mercy being so important and integral to every single comp, they did not have a good Mercy player. So they were pretty much bound to lose the majority of the games they played, and they did. And when you go into stage 2 being like 1 in 10 or 1 in 9, whatever, it's like, I don't know. It's hard to like get your confidence back, even if you're able to play heroes that you're more comfortable on. You still have a lot to overcome. Now you have a tank line that you have to probably improve and mold them into a more dive heavy mindset. I think Awesome Guy will bring a lot to that team actually. And I think like it was really weird with their team because they started mixing their DPS players around like what roles they were playing, but their DPS were never really the issue, I would say. So it was like Tivik on Tracer one game, Tivik on Soldier the next game, Logics, vice versa. And it was like, there are like other changes that you can make probably that will actually impact you winning the game. Because I think that, especially in Tivik's case, he spreads himself really thin on the heroes that he plays. He like tries to play every single hero in the game. And the way like most teams are is they have like people who are really good at like 2 to 3 heroes. And
what do you think he should specialize on?
I don't know. I think he's really, really good at Tracer. He got really good at Tracer towards the end. I always thought he was more of like a Soldier player. I always thought his Soldier was like incredibly good. I think it's one of his best heroes. So I would say not the Tracer role. I say he should play Soldier Genji, maybe Pharah.
What's the Big Widow like?
He was like the best sniper in TF2, honestly.
He was really fucking good. I know he used to be good, but like, can he play it though? Watch League. Well, I don't feel like I haven't seen him play Widow since Logic came out.
He played with a lot of Widow in stage 1 when Juggernaut.
Yeah.
That's like another one of those things where it's like he played a lot of Widow when like the game first came out too, right? He was like an incredible Widow when the game first came out. But it's like when you play all those different kinds of heroes, it's like, can you really like expect that same level of play out of your Widow as you would normally, right? Because like Linkster just kind of plays Widow, like in stage 1 he played Widow and McCree pretty much exclusively. So it's like you're always practicing it, always grinding it, so it's a lot easier to perform to the best of your ability. But the problem is like he's switching roles. And
I think this bridges into a larger conversation about DPS players in general now, though, because we can talk about having specialists, but then you sort of show your hand when these players go into the maps, and you're not as versatile in terms of your composition or your play style. So now we see players that like Dream Casper or Libero that have these enormous hero pools, which unlock so many different strategies that these teams can play at any given time. So you say it may be better to be going into specialization, but I'm not sure that's the case. In fact, I think that the teams that are doing very well right now have more flexibility in the DPS roles.
I think you need flexibility, but I think there's a certain point at which you can kind of like go over where you don't necessarily need that much experience on every single DPS role. Because I think that a lot of Overwatch is pretty much played switching between like 2 comps. It's like you either play dive or you play what you think you play better than dive on a certain map. So as long as your DPS players can like swap between whatever you need to play for dive and whatever you need to play for your other comp, then it's usually, I think, the best. Because you're always going to have, there are some heroes where you can kind of just roll onto it. Like I think Soldier is a hero that doesn't necessarily need like a ton of grinding, but there's like, Widow and McCree and Tracer and Genji actually, all of which need like constant time and constant attention. And if you're trying to juggle being like a Tracer, Genji, Widow, and like McCree player or something, it's really hard. And I think Tivik was spreading himself way too thin.
I think specialization doesn't need to be too specialized to a couple heroes, but like you need to play like your role. I don't think a person who ever plays the Widow, Genji, Pharah should be playing Tracer ever in a match, because that means that they're definitely spreading themselves thin. Like Tracer is like one of the hardest characters to play, like at the top level, because there's so many mind games that happen within that role that you like. If you're just like you always play those other heroes, and then like now you're playing Tracer against Sebulbe. Good luck understanding with how do you win this 1v1. So like Tavik either needs to embrace the Tracer player, or I think he needs to stay away from it, and they should leave it with Logix. So if that happens, Tavik needs to get his Widow to a point where it's like ridiculously good, and at that point he's almost competing with Sire player for his spot. So, but as soon as you start like mixing and mashing, as Clockwork said, you're spreading yourself too thin, and it's really hard to play against people that are just specializing within those roles.
When you have like such a you live like life on the edge when you play Tracer, and if you don't play it enough, you'll just constantly die because you're just not expecting to die in a way that you did die. So it's like, I think that Logix is probably their best Tracer and the Tracer that should be playing every match. And as a result, I think that he should pretty much be in all the time. And then you would swap between Tavik and Saya player based on like what map you're playing and what heroes they can play. But I think that, Tavik could definitely just market himself better as a soldier, Widow, maybe Sombra player or something. I think like Saya player would be better at the other alternatives.
Well, the weird thing is that in a way, if you have a great Tracer player in the current meta and the current map pool, it's actually incredibly helpful for your other DPS player to actually be a Widow Genji player, because that way you can play dive and you can play Widow Tracer at the same time, which is something that Tavik can do. So,
I would say that is definitely his specialization, the direction he should be going.
Yeah, I agree. I think Tavik is like a really good player. It's actually like a shame that I think he hasn't had like the impact that he should have, because I think he's one of the best Western DPS for sure, and he just hasn't really had the opportunity to show that he is. And I think that in due time, when they get their team all settled, he can actually show how good he is.
I think that's actually one of the reasons why Libero is so good right now, because remember, we don't know Libero is a Widowmaker player because it was Saya player who was playing the Widow on Meta Athena, and he only started playing Widowmaker late in stage 2, but he was really good at it. But one of the tools New York has right now is that they have the best Tracer player, and they have a guy who can play both Genji and Widow and Sombra.
And
like,
anything.
In this meta, that's crazy good.
Yeah, like I think Libero has done a really good job. Like if you want any of your players to be able to spread themselves thin, it's like the role that Libero is in. Like those 5 players essentially play the exact same thing across the board on New York. Like they always play the Winston Diva, Zen, Mercy, Lucio sometimes, and they always play the same thing. And Libero just plays whatever the meta requires or whatever the map requires. And like it's great to have a player that you can trust on any role. Like he plays Hanzo, he plays everything, he plays Junkrat, like he plays Farah.
I don't know if I think that's quite fair, because New York also plays a shit ton of Orisa Roadhog. So
that's true, actually. Yeah, I might have been like maybe stepping a little bit, but yeah, like Orisa Roadhog is definitely something that they have played at times, but like I always imagine their strength in the Winston Diva, Zenyatta, like composition.
Yeah.
With all these teams that have gotten new players and are on the rise, and there's not that many teams left where it's so hopeless, where the fuck in all of this does the Seoul Dynasty actually fit? Because this seems like the team that's the odd man out, They're not the really dominant Korean team. They've never actually had a period where they were super fire and wrecking everyone every week. They've been up and down. They still always get like a winning record, It's not like they lose that often, but they've started this stage with a loss. Where's Seoul Dynasty at in stage 3 right now?
I think it's important to, as we look at Lunatic High's legacy, to remember they were playing a lot of like 7-game finals. They were never super dominant. They were always sort of living on the edge in a way. But what's fascinating about Seoul is that previously we would think about this team as being built around their tanks and their supports. This is a team that didn't have the greatest DPS players. It was about Jaehong, it was about Toby, it was about Miro and Zunba. These were the guys that were stepping up and making the big plays. And now it seems strangely that they're having exactly the opposite problem, which is that Fleta is definitely one of the best players in the league, And Munchkin isn't a slouch either, but for some reason it's their supports and tanks that are really underperforming and letting them down. And I think they continue to get more and more exposed because Jaehong and Toby are basically dove now. That's how New York was able to, and London were able to dismember Seoul towards the end of stage 2, is they focused Jaehong, killed the supports first in every fight, and the tank line isn't doing enough to keep those supports alive.
Yeah, I just think it's really, I think their biggest downfall has been that they keep switching out Jaehong, Toby, or Zumba to give the other players a chance or exposure or whatever they're doing. Like, it was actually a really funny, stupid moment that happened within the match. I didn't realize they weren't playing Jaehong and Toby until halftime. Because I'm a Mercy player, I don't see their names and that kind of stuff. I just looking at icons and that kind of stuff. I had not realized. I just assumed they were playing Jaehong and Toby, and I'm like, oh, these guys aren't playing very well today. And then I look and they're playing Guido and they've got the Gambler, and I'm like, why are they doing this? And then I was like, halftime, I'm like, okay, they're probably going to switch Jaehong and Toby back in. Let's see how this goes. And then they didn't, and I was like, you could tell how they were underperforming compared to Jaehong and Toby. So I don't understand. They're trying to force their bench too much. I don't think Guido ever compares to Jaehong. I think Gambler, as much as he is an amazing player, you can't just switch him in halfway through the season and expect him to perform, because at this point they're losing matches that I feel like they really need to win to sort of solidify themselves in the spot they want to be. So I don't know. I don't really understand the decisions of the coaching staff, but maybe they're looking for the long game, but we'll see.
Even though later this week, so they got destroyed by you guys, and then they started their A roster, but it was sure, they got the 4-0, okay, against San Francisco Shock, but that was an uncomfortably close 4-0. They went into time bank on 2 of the maps. They squeaked out a win on Control. That could have easily been a 3-1 in favor of San Francisco. Yeah. So
can we just acknowledge, though, that momentary glimpse into the life of a Mercy player, where it's like, good game, Jaehong. Actually, I'm Guido. What the fuck? Who was playing that game then?
I imagine Custa, and he's like, "Oh man, I am so fucking good at this game.
I'm dominant at this game."
He's thinking back to when he was in Custa's
Apex season 2.
in Apex, and he's like, "Man, I used to get dominated by these guys, but who's the god now?" And then he presses tab, and he's like, "Shit. It's just
these guys."
Fuck.
I wanted to shake their hands and be like, I've done it, boys. And then I got across the stage and what the?
Yeah. I think they're lacking confidence or so. It's really weird. Because I think that they genuinely thought that roster would have given them a better chance to win that game against the Valiant. But
yeah, they must have had some.
Why, right? Why would you think that that's true, right? So it's just weird, because even against us, last stage, right? They didn't run Fleta until the last map.
Yeah, what the fuck was that, by the way? That was
what
insane.
Was that?
Yeah,
that's weird, right? So I feel like they just have confidence issues where they don't know what the problem is, and they're trying a bunch of different ways to fix it, but they haven't fixed it yet. And I don't know if it's you said, maybe the team was built around the tanks and supports earlier on when they were dominant in Korea, and now maybe their DPS players require more attention or more support or whatever it is. But they're not. I think they're lacking confidence for sure.
I just don't understand, like you're saying, why they don't put Fleta in. They have 4 or 5 coaches, and at this point, I feel like the coaches are just sitting in these meetings and they're trying to play 4D chess or something with these rosters, being like, yes, and Guido is the perfect counter to this player's style, but they're playing some sort of perfect scenario game that doesn't make sense in the actual real functional world of Overwatch, and they're not just using Fleta. Just play Fleta, play around Fleta's strengths, tell your tanks to keep your supports alive, because in Overwatch, if Jaehong and Toby die first every fight, which they were towards the end of last stage, especially when they played against London, you just can't win. You cannot win a fight where your supports are dead unless you get very lucky or Fleta makes some god play, because that's just not how Overwatch works as a game. You have to have your supports alive.
I feel like they need that person that Thorin was talking about before, where the coaches are sitting around, they're like, maybe we take out Fleta, and they have someone hit the person on the back of the head. Like, no, don't do anything. Stop it.
Yes.
Weren't they running like Fleta on Tracer too and Munchkin on Sombra or something?
Yes. Which
against
was which was also super weird because obviously
so weird.
Fleta has been the Sombra player. It's not like Fleta hasn't played Sombra.
Like he's good at Sombra, and honestly, like Munchkin is just way better than him at Tracer. Like if there's one DPS hero in the game where I wouldn't be afraid of playing Fleta on, or be less afraid, it would be Tracer. Like he's amazing on every other DPS hero, and he's like a game changer. And Munchkin, I think Munchkin is one of the best Tracers in the league, honestly. He's super smart.
I just don't get the dynasty, like sort of the concept of the team. Because you look okay at the New York team, as we've mentioned, like absolutely ridiculous team in terms of talent. And then because they can all play that particular style, they don't even have to swap people around roles. They just play the same role all the time, basically. And then you maybe put Libero on different heroes. That's about it. You just get to do that and win. Spitfire, okay, fair enough. They had 2 whole teams, so they were figuring out which pieces do we keep. They've sold parts of them off. You know, there's like a rationale there. The Seoul Dynasty team, as we're saying, some of these, like the experimental lineups were incredibly weird. Like you would never experiment without the best player. And then some of the players, like the one that always stands out to me currently is Wakid. Like, is this guy someone's cousin who owns a team or something? Why is he on the team? Why does he get put in matches? My boy Custa over here has to wait for everything to burn down before he gets a chance. Why is Wakid getting inserted in the games?
I don't like. I think Wiki kind of has. He plays like the Junkrat, right? For them?
Sure.
Fleta can also play Junkrat. Just going to point that out.
Okay, so yeah.
If you notice, they do only put him in against like the lower teams. They put him in
That's
against the Shanghais and the Fuels of the world. Shock back before. Obviously, they had a decent time.
I think the weirder one to me is Guido. I just like Guido was a great DPS player back in Apex, right? And he had some great moments on Tracer, but coming into his support, I just don't think his Zen is even like comparably close to Jaehong. So even if you do want to give him like a chance, you're like intentionally putting yourself like so much lower, especially with the amount of influence that I'm sure Jaehong has within that team. So it's like taking out an important player of your team and then also subbing in a worse player. It never makes sense to me.
Yeah. I don't know, maybe they are trying to like, I think like maybe with the way that they were using Munchkin over Bunny, especially is maybe they're like looking for more like sufficient DPS players who can like enable their tanks and supports more to play greedier. Because I think that was like a big thing with Bunny is I think Bunny has like, I think he honestly has like the best Tracer mechanics in the entire game. I think his aim and his movement and just the way he can handle 1v1s and the damage he does. I think his weakest part of this game is the pulse bomb, I guess. His pulse bombs aren't the best. But I think that like a player like him, like you need to support him a lot to actually make him worthwhile. And they probably couldn't find like a formula that actually made him the player that he could be. So there was like no reason to keep him. Whereas like Munchkin, I think is just a much more like cerebral, like I'll play around what the tanks are doing kind of player. So it could just be like they're trying to find the right formula to help Miro and Zumba and Ryu Jaehong become, what they used to be. But I don't know.
Because in this upcoming week, Seoul plays in their second game against the Gladiators. So who do you think will win this game? Can Gladiators beat Seoul?
If Seoul plays their main lineup, I think Seoul wins like 3-2, 3-1. But yeah. I think it's not going to be clean, and that's like assuming that Seoul don't have like, repercussions from the first week. So, but like if Seoul plays anything that isn't like Zumba, Jaehong, Toby, then I think they lose that match.
Yeah, I agree. It's weird because I think all their players are so good. They're even like when they run their main lineup, it looks like they're not playing like up to their potential. Like Munchkin and Fleta should be like one of the best DPS duos in the entire league, and I feel like as a group they're not outputting as much as other DPS duos. Same with like the rest of their lineup. Really, it's like they haven't really worked together to actually synergize anything, and they're kind of just playing unconfidently.
Yeah, they're also extremely flexible too, which is another disappointment. We look at the way how many heroes they can play. They're in a very good situation that way. They even have effective strategies that nobody else is able to duplicate, like the way that Jaehong plays Mei on Junkertown is fantastic. And they're the only team that does that. So it's impossible for anybody to practice against it. So they always have this weird strat that you have to play into. You know it's coming, but it's difficult to stop.